Hello and welcome to the Actual Tech Media Data Protection, Disaster Recovery, and Disaster Recovery as a Service Megacast event. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media. Thank you so much for joining us on today's Megacast. We've got a great event lined up for you today. On today's event, you'll hear from experts at Cohesity, Zerto with TierPoint, Island with Veeam, Druva, Nutanix, StorageCraft, and Flexential. If you have disaster recovery and data protection challenges, you're in the right place. This event is for you. We want this to be educational. We want you to get all your questions answered, and we want you to have a lot of fun while doing it. We've got some awesome prizes lined up for you today. I'm going to talk about those here in just a moment. We also have prize terms and conditions. I'll cover those as well. I do want you to know that there is a Q&A panel there. We broke that out on its own separate panel to make sure that there was plenty of room on your screen so that you could use the questions panel, ask as many questions as you'd like about data protection and disaster recovery. Of course, we appreciate all the comments and feedback coming in. Hello, Dallas, Milwaukee, Sunnyvale, West Palm Beach, Florida, Chicago, Pennsylvania. I saw Texas. I saw California, all sorts of places around the United States, Canada, around the world. So thank you, everyone, for joining us on the event today. We also have some poll questions for you. We'll be asking those along the way during the presentation. We appreciate your participation in those. One other thing here, we want this to be a social event. I'll be tweeting about the event over on Twitter. I'll talk about the hashtag in just a moment. It is DP Megacast, by the way, Data Protection Megacast. The cool thing is you can tweet directly from your console using the Twitter icon on the bottom of the screen, and that way the hashtag will be automatically appended. The first time that you tweet there, you will have to authorize with Twitter. That's the standard Twitter authorization. But that should work just fine. And then after that, anything you type in there, the hashtag will be automatically appended. I'll be monitoring Twitter throughout the event. I'll be replying to anyone who tweets about the event and retweeting, probably following just about anyone who tweets about the event as well. We appreciate all of our followers, all of our Megacast participants and attendees, so thank you. And then finally, resources. We have some resources there in the handouts pane on your console. We have either a PDF or a link from each of the presenters today. If you click on each one of those PDFs, they will be automatically downloaded to your downloads folder, and you can check them out later after the event. Now, I mentioned we have prizes. Man, I need to get some of these AirPod Pros. They look really awesome. We are giving out 20 AirPod Pros today, and if you are on the event, you've got a great chance of winning one of these AirPod Pros, as well as our Amazon $500 gift cards. We'll be giving out one of those after each of today's presenters. By my count, that is 7 Amazon $500 gift cards and 20 Apple AirPod Pros. So best of luck to everyone who is live on the event today. That is the primary requirement to be eligible for the drawings, but we do have some additional prize terms and conditions. You can find those in the handouts tab. If you scroll to the bottom and click on ATM prize terms, that's where you will find the full legalese prize terms and conditions. All prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and that's what you need to know about prizes. Now, one more thing, though, charity. We have given out thousands of dollars to charities. In fact, we had a prize winner yesterday who wanted to donate to the Hunger Project. So thank you, everyone who wins a prize and would like to donate their prize value to charity. It's very, very generous of you, and we appreciate every person who does that. So thank you in advance. If you win a prize and you choose to donate it to charity, that's always an option, and we would love to help you do that. Now, social media, I mentioned the hashtag, again, is DP Megacast over on Twitter. That stands for Data Protection Megacast. You can follow Actual Tech Media. We are at Actual Tech Media on Twitter. And you can follow me. That's David M. Davis. I'm always tweeting about the latest and greatest in enterprise tech, and so is Actual Tech Media. So we hope to catch up with you there. We're also glad to catch up with you over on YouTube. We have a very active YouTube channel. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, our Facebook page. We also have a 10 on Tech podcast, and you can subscribe to that in the iTunes store. It was just named one of the top podcasts to listen to in 2020 when it comes to enterprise technology. And then finally, LinkedIn. On the top right-hand corner of your browser, you'll see 3 icons. There's icons there for LinkedIn, for Twitter, and for our YouTube channel. So you can click on those icons. Those aren't just graphics. They're actually clickable icons. Those will take you to the respective social media pages for Actual Tech Media, and you can subscribe or follow on those pages as well. And with that, I'm excited to introduce today's keynote presenter. That is Mr. David Chapa. He is the founder and a chief analyst at the CTE Group. I've known David for some time now, and he has been an executive and a professional at a number of data protection companies. But now what he does is he helps real enterprises out there with their disaster recovery and their data protection projects. So he goes around, he does consulting with his company, the CTE Group, and he has a number of predictions. In fact, the top 5 predictions for 2020 when it comes to data protection, disaster recovery, and disaster recovery as a service. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. David Chapa for our keynote presentation.
Hi, David Chapa here. I'm with the CTE Group. I'm the senior analyst and founder. I'm traveling this week, but I want to make sure I get this video done because it's time sensitive. We're winding down 2019 and about ready to enter into 2020. So what does that mean for us in data protection and technology? Well, I spent some time kind of researching a little bit of what I believe is going to be happening. I've got my notes down here on my table and in front of me, and I'll be reading those off to you. What I decided to do this year is a little bit different than I've done in past years in these predictions. Is I've decided to do my top 5 using song titles from the late 60s or middle 60s and the 80s. I've been in data protection for a long time. I've been seeing a lot of things happen over the years. I've loved watching the new technologies emerge and the new solutions that really help IT deliver at a much higher level. But the reality is, where we sit today is not necessarily how fast can I back that up. It's really about the data itself. What's inside that encapsulated, protected nugget that I have? Is it important? And so those are some of the things that I thought about. So starting with my top 5 list, using song titles, the song remains the same. Now, what category could that be? Tape. You're right. Way to go. Tape is not dying. Tape has never died. You know, think about this. We got this continuum here. Back in the 80s, tape was king. Tape basically filled out this entire continuum, except with a little bit of removable disc packs and things like that for backup. But tape was the king. Now, as cheaper disc was introduced and faster disc, and we were doing more in that client-server environment, tape kind of shifted a little bit, and then deduplication came in, and then tape shifted down here a little more. But tape never said, or we never said to tape, you're gone and dead, and we took you away. It just moved further down that line. So it was king, and now it's still king, but it's got some princes and princesses in front of it. So deduplication disk, cheap disk, that's still going to be working together with tape. Tape still is a solution that will be around. Number 4, pump up the jam. I just had to give you a little pause there. This is about appliances, backup appliances. You know, they're not going away. They are going to be around. And primary reason for that is you want fast recoveries. Cloud backup is certainly happening. Disaster recovery in the cloud is certainly happening, but we are in this hybrid model. So we are looking at ways that we can both protect and recover pretty seamlessly. But the speed to recover is sometimes hindered by network performance. And I'm talking about getting it down from the cloud. Again, not saying cloud's bad, I'm just saying that's the reality of the situation. So the appliances, the speed and recovery for data locally on-prem is still going to be around, it's going to be important. But look for other technology advances within those appliances to help speed up the recovery process from the cloud if you got to bring that data down. So number 3 is Get Off of My Cloud by the Rolling Stones. Yeah, multi-cloud is going to be big. It's growing, more in adoption, but it's going to be growing even more in 2020. So solutions that will support multi-cloud, not only from just a data perspective, but multi-cloud from an application perspective. Application in cloud A, data in cloud B, or data in cloud B and C. So solutions that support multi-cloud in an effortless way for IT, look for those solutions to emerge in 2020 and 2021. All right, number 2, the song Automatic by the Pointer Sisters. Yes, automation is going to continue to flourish very nicely in 2020, especially around disaster recovery. Again, one of the more challenging things in our IT world is disaster recovery and getting it done, but also documenting it. So any kind of solution that can help you document your disaster recovery. In other words, these are the machines that we're going to be recovering, but these are the dependencies that these machines and applications have. That's important. And if you can find a solution that will help automate that, that's going to be a home run for you in 2020. Number 1 is Somebody's Watching Me. Can you guess? Yes. GDPR and data privacy. So 2 years ago, GDPR came out in the EU, and it was a big to-do, not to make a rhyme, because that meant even if you were not in the EU, but you were doing business in the EU, you had to comply with those regulations. So that put a lot of U.S. Companies, on edge a little bit, figuring out what they had to do, how they had to do it, and comply. California similarly produced their own data protection privacy act called California Consumer Protection Act, or CCPA. By the way, that was proposed in 2018, and it goes into effect January 1, 2020. So the California Consumer Protection Act goes into effect January 1, 2020. So it's important. Start looking for other states to do something similar to what California has done and what the EU has done. Even in New York, they have, it's called NY Shield. New York Stop Hacks and Improve Data Security. That's what NY Shield stands for. So look for this to happen and spread across the entire U.S. and maybe even become something federally mandated. And those are my top 5 predictions for 2020. I hope you enjoyed the humor in it, and you liked my little Casey Kasem voice that I could get out there. And on a serious note, the data privacy, data security is a big thing. That all has come out because of data leaks and our own personal information getting out there that we never intended for it to be released, obviously. So be looking for those solutions, looking for those governances and those regulations by state. And then also, if you're going to be doing business in New York or business in California, know too that you have to understand what those regulations look like. So I hope you all have a wonderful New Year, and you have a very safe celebration of the New Year. And we'll be talking to you, or I'll be talking to you in 2020 for sure. Again, I'm David Chapa with the CTE Group. Thanks for listening.
All right, great presentation there by David Chapa. Some really good predictions, some really good advice as well. And I too enjoyed the song titles. So thank you, David. Now I've just brought up a poll question, and the question on the screen is, and I'll share the results of this poll with you. It simply says, which of these are your greatest data protection or disaster recovery challenge? So what are you struggling with today? What are your challenges out there? Again, let me share the results of this with you here in just a moment. All right, looks like the results are on the screen. 49% said the cost of data protection and DR. 49% are concerned about the cost. That's their greatest concern, followed by 40% who said data security, so keeping data secure. Once we can pay for it, we need to make sure that it's secure. And then after that, it looks like 33% said recovery speed. That's number 3 on the list, followed by number 4 was simply the data growth, massively growing data sets that I know that every company out there is struggling with. If you were not able to see the poll or weren't able to press submit on the poll, I encourage you to try first refreshing your browser. Second, make sure you're using Chrome. Third, I recommend a private browsing session or a Chrome incognito browsing session if you're having any trouble with the poll question. All right, second poll question, and again, I'll share the results of this with you, and that is, what's your plan for cloud-based data protection or disaster recovery solutions? Is this something you're not using today but plan to in 2020? Maybe you're using today and you continue to plan to continue using in 2020, or you're not using today and you probably won't use it in 2020 unless your mind has changed on today's event. So again, I'll share the results of this one with you. I'm curious to see what everyone's doing out there in the audience. All right, let me share the results of this with you. And it looks like 43% are using some sort of cloud-based data protection or disaster recovery solution today. 43%, followed by 32% who aren't using any cloud DP or DR solutions today, but they plan to use them in 2020. And then finally, 24% who say they're not using any cloud options today, and they probably won't be using it in 2020 either. So thank you for those responses. And then finally, last poll question before I introduce you to our first presenter, and that is, what's your time frame for updating or selecting new data protection solutions? If you're on the event today, likely you're having challenges. We just talked about the challenges, the cost, data security, growing data, recovery speed. I'm curious to find out, what's your time frame to make a switch? Is it in the next 6 months, the next 6 to 12 months, 12 to 24 months, or you don't have a time frame today? All right, I'll leave that question up here for just a moment while we get our first presenter ready. All right, excellent. Thank you everyone who responded to that poll question. It's now my pleasure to introduce our first presenter on today's Megacast. That is Raj Dutt, Director of Product Marketing at Cohesity. Raj, are you with us?
Hey, good morning. I'm here.
Good morning, Raj. Thanks for being on. Take it away.
Hey, thank you so much. Thanks for having me at the webinar. So December is actually an interesting time. It's always a month when people actually reflect back on how the year was, and also actually look forward on what the next steps might be in the coming year. And 2019 has been an interesting year for when you look at data security. In fact, in your poll, that was the second biggest thing that audiences here or attendees here are concerned about, data security. In fact, 2019, we saw a few of the biggest data breaches that impacted all of us as consumers. And ransomware attacks that impacted cities, state governments, and also businesses. In fact, it hit hard the mid-market businesses, where some of them went out of business because of ransomware attack. So what I'm going to cover in this session is how people, process, and technology needs to be evolved or thought through in defending against these cyber threats, and more importantly, responding to it. Because cyber attacks it's not if, but it's when. So let's start by looking at what the current state of these cyber threats are. $2.1 trillion. That's the cost that's going to be for the global economy just for this year. To give some perspective, I'm not an economic guy, but I was looking at some numbers. For 2018, the U.S. GDP was $21 trillion. So you're talking about 10% of that for the global impact of cyber threats. And $11.5 billion just from ransomware attacks. So that's a substantial number out there that's impacting the businesses. And when we look at how these attacks happen, not a secret, but one, it's the user action. It's us who click on unintentionally things and we impact the environment. So what has been happening recently is the IT organizations, the security organizations have been educating the internal audiences on the best practices. And that has definitely helped, but a lot more needs to happen in that area. The second is vulnerabilities. In fact, the biggest breaches that I was referring to, it's a known fact that those breaches were caused because the vulnerabilities in the production environment were not addressed. And these vulnerabilities are public information. Just like you and I know about it, so do the bad actors. So they exploit it. So let's look at how businesses are ready, how enterprises are ready to address this. Cohesity actually commissioned a research through Forrester, and the numbers were pretty alarming, I would say. 21% of the respondents said they have contingency plans for recovering after an attack. That's 21% only. That leaves good 80-some percent out there that are not ready for it. In fact, when it came to recovery of it, it took them 3 days, or 11% of respondents said that it took them 3 days to recover from an attack. So that's 3 days of business that's get impacted. And what's also alarming is they were only able to recover 58% of their entire business, which means that half of the business or the data was unable to recover. The impact of that is huge. 51% of the respondents said they actually experienced loss of customer trust. They had revenue loss, customer loss, partner trust loss, and then everything that comes with it. So net, we know that cyber attacks, cyber threats are real. And as much as the focus is on defending to an attack, it's also important to actually strategize in responding to the attack. And what we mean by that is your recovery or your response needs to be predictable. The ability to confidently recover your data when and where you need it without compromise should be the goal. And it's not all about technology, like I said. It actually starts with tighter collaboration between the different teams. The infrastructure and operations team responsible for the infrastructure needs to work much closely with the security organization. There needs to be clearly defined roles and responsibilities on who's doing what when the attack happens. What's going to be the process like? All of that needs to be very clearly defined and documented so that when things go wrong, the businesses can respond to it quickly. It also starts with the backup success rate. We all know that with legacy backup environment, it is just impossible to back up everything for a number of reasons. They're slow, they bleed into the production time. Your infrastructure has grown so much that you're just unable to protect all that data. And I actually was talking to one of the backup users, like, what keeps you up at night? And it's like, it's not the 80% that I'm able to back up, it's the 20% that I'm unable to back up. So it all starts with 100% success backup rate. Anything less than 100% is unacceptable. And when you start to look at recovery, it's hard to recover when you're siloed. It needs to be, your solution needs to support global actionable search, where you can look for the object or the item you need to recover and look across your global footprint, because we know we actually do operate in a hybrid cloud environment. In fact, your survey said roughly 40% of the attendees today have some level of deployment in the cloud. So your search needs to be global. And when the recoveries happen, it needs to be there needs to be visibility into what you're recovering. What if you're actually recovering something that is compromised? What if it actually has vulnerabilities in it? So you actually can be the guy who reintroduced a vulnerability by recovering from a compromised copy. So that visibility is important. It's data consistency. The last thing you need is you're recovering in a scenario where time is of an essence, and you end up with data not found. So whatever you have in the primary environment needs to be consistent with what's in the backup, or vice versa. And clearly establish the recovery objectives. Going back to the people and process, it's good for the IO team to actually have the recovery objectives, but they need to clearly align that with the business owners, their internal audiences, and ensure that the SLAs are actually meeting the business objective. Recovery at scale, because these ransomware attacks, wherever they have happened, they take out the entire environment. So it needs to be at scale. It is just not possible to recover 1, 2, 3 VMs at a time. In fact, going back to the 58% stat that I showed previously, the reason of recovering only 58% is because the encryption keys sometimes are not exactly labeled as to what the encryption key or decryption key is for which asset. And after a while, just that data is gone. And recover anywhere to any point in time. So flexibility is important. So paths to predictable recovery are looking at how best you can have your own predictable recovery, which is your ability to recover any data from any point to any location without any compromise should be the goal. And when we look at what Cohesity's point of view is, security is part of the solution. We take pride in that, and with the goal of predictable recovery. Starting with reducing the global footprint of your data. In fact, your fourth point in the survey was, or actually first was reducing the cost, and I believe the fourth was just addressing the data growth. So by reducing your attack surface with a single global platform, you're addressing both of those. You're reducing your cost, you're reducing the data footprint, and in return, you're actually also making sure that you have less to worry about in terms of the attack surface. Visibility. Again, data point coming from another research where 60% of the security professionals that were or 100% of the professionals that were interviewed, 60% said they can have more visibility. They want more visibility. So visibility is key. And defending against attacks. So what recently has been happening is, just as the technology has evolved, so have the attackers. What they do is they sit in the primary environment. They know backup is your last line of defense. They actually go infect that, take the backup out, and then come in, encrypt the production environment. So your backup needs to be the last line of defense. It needs to make sure that ransomware attacks are not impacting the backup environment. And when it happens, again, time is important. Have a way to detect that a ransomware attack is in progress, because it can take up to 2-3 weeks for the user to know that the attack is in progress, because it's slow moving. So detection is important. And finally, like I said, response to an attack is paramount. So I'll double click on these in the next few slides, starting with reducing your attack surface. This is what our typical environment looks like. You have data center, your core, you have multi-cloud environment, you have remote sites. All of them extremely fragmented. You have multiple point solutions that leads to fragmentation, inefficiency, and dark data. And that leads to the large attack surface. Just imagine your own home. The amount of or number of windows, doors you have, you just need to defend all those entry points. The less number of entry points you have, it's easier to defend. And what has been happening? Enterprises are relying on these point solutions. Starting from left to right, they're looking at data protection they're looking at point solution for data protection. Target storage comes from a different vendor. Media servers coming from yet another vendor. If you look at your unstructured data, that's managed through another vendor. And then if you're going to the cloud, you're relying on yet another point solution. This is nothing more than multiple entry points for the bad guys to come into your production environment and take it over. So how Cohesity addresses that? We offer a software-defined platform that runs on-premises and in the public cloud. And we consolidate all these point solutions on a single web-scale platform. This helps to not just reduce your data footprint, but also helps to reduce the attack surface and address things like your cost, your data growth. So reducing your attack surface is the first goal. Look at a solution that not just offers a modern backup solution, but also addresses your file services, your object storage. Reduces your attack surface, your data footprint by global variable and dedupe. Support global search so that when it comes to recovery, you're able to search for specific things and bring the business back up, reduce the downtime. And simplify management. Going back to people, process, and clearly defining the rules and responsibilities. It's important that it's easy to get to all those things in a quick way. So simplified management. This talks about reducing the attack surface. But then visibility, like I said, is important. So Cohesity partnered with Tenable, and we are able to bring visibility into your production environment without impacting it. So that's important. Looking for cyber exposures and managing your vulnerabilities by looking through your backup, because your backup is nothing more than a copy of the production. So what the solution does is it actually discovers the blind spots in your production environment, your production VMs, your production databases, by scanning the backup copy on Cohesity with zero impact to your production. It also ensures that you are actually recovering from a clean snapshot, so helping you recover or giving you clear visibility into your recoverability status. You're not blinded, or you're not just assuming that the copy you're recovering from is actually good enough. So when I say that, I'm talking about recovering with confidence. Because Cohesity gives you visibility into your backup snapshots health and recoverability status, you actually are able to clearly see which snapshot you want to recover from. In the process, you avoid re-injecting a vulnerability as part of your recovery process into your production environment, because you don't want to be the guy who re-injected the vulnerability after the security team has patched that hole. And the ability to recover any data from any location to any point in time, all with the goal for a predictable recovery. So that's your risk posture. So typically what happens is, as you all know, you run these vulnerability scans in your production environment on a weekly, best case weekly schedule or monthly. But we also know for a number of factors, example, your 24/7 uptime requirements, you just are unable to run these scans or address these vulnerabilities in your production environment. In fact, your legacy environment might not be able to handle these scanners. So now you can actually run those scans on your backup copy on demand or part of your policy as frequently as you want. Your backups are typically on a daily basis, so you can run those scans within Cohesity's runtime environment to look for vulnerabilities in your production environment, with, like I said before, with zero impact to your production, giving you more visibility, augmenting what you have been doing in your production, but giving you greater visibility. But how good a visibility is if you cannot act upon it? So we just don't stop at giving you the information, but also giving you actionable recommendation. The unified threat dashboard gives you a single view, going back to the global management, of where the vulnerabilities are. Not just that, but how do you address that? So linking back to the CVE databases and giving you actionable recommendations that you can address before you actually bring the production or your systems back online. So all your backup copies are still good to be used, but with a greater depth and greater visibility that you can address any vulnerabilities. So assuming you're still doing all these things, but we know we don't live in a perfect environment, and things do go wrong. So in a situation where you do get impacted, and let's look at if you're using a legacy environment. This is your very simplified version of an environment where a user accidentally clicks on something. Before they know, the production environment is compromised. But in the old way, the backup was always there to bring the environment back up. And like I said before, as much as the technology has evolved, so have the attackers. They have become extremely sophisticated. They realize that your backup is your last line of defense. So before they encrypt the production environment, and malwares like Lockheed and Crypto, they actually come and take out your backup. They take the last line of defense out. Then they come and encrypt the production environment. So by the time you know, it's too late. So if the same thing was happening, if backup was Cohesity, what we would do is we would prevent ransomware or malware to impact the backup environment. I want to be clear that the prevention is at the backup layer. As an architecture, we are an immutable file system. What that means is your golden copy is untouchable. Once it's written, there is no application or user can modify the data. Anytime anything tries to write or modify the copy, it creates a zero-cost clone, and it stores that data as a separate set. So your gold copy is never impacted. In fact, we are the first and the only ones in the entire space to have worm capabilities for the snapshot. Worm is a very well-known concept in the storage space, but worm, as what we call as data lock, is unique, or we're the first ones to introduce that, and we have had that for some time, bringing that to the backup where once you put that worm on a snapshot, before the time expires, even the security officer cannot delete that snapshot. What that does is it helps you with any internal disgruntled employees, because we know the attacks are not just always external, they can be internal as well. And then supporting multi-factor authentication, making sure right people get access to the right data. But things do go wrong, like I said. So with our machine learning capabilities, Cohesity will look at the data ingest rate and other multiple things to look for any anomalies and alert the users that a potential attack is in progress. Because we support both backup data and unstructured data, we are able to look at your entire footprint and look at data change rate even in unstructured and alert much faster that there is something going on, where you can choose to teach the machine learning algorithm that this is not an attack, so you do have that option. But if it is an attack, you can take the corrective actions, which means response. So how do we respond to the attack? Starting with our architecture, the ability to help you store unlimited number of snaps and clones in one location without any impact to your production environment. You can keep all of that data on premises, or you can choose to move it to the public cloud. But the closer the data, the faster you can respond to it. You can bring that back up and reduce the downtime. Google like global actionable search. You don't need to go through the whole tree build out, though you'd have the option of. With global Google like search, you can actually look for the specific things across your global footprint and take the action from that very search. The search puts you in your recovery flow. That again helps to reduce time. And then, like I said previously, the security breaches, when they happen, it is most likely a disaster recovery scenario. And you cannot afford to wait for recovering 2 or 3 VMs at a time. You need the ability to recover at scale. And Cohesity uniquely delivers that to our customers. Going back to the architecture, it's all about the architecture. We, as a backup solution, keep all the snapshots fully hydrated. What that means is we are making the data available as the restore needs to happen. So no stitching is happening when the recovery is requested. All the data is not just ingested as in a distributed fashion because of the distributed architecture, but even when the recovery is happening, we break the file into smaller chunks. We call the concept as a mega file. Anything that's bigger than 250 gigs, we will break that up into smaller chunks and use the distributed architecture to make that data available to your application. And lastly, the ability to make data available directly from the platform. Unlike legacy solutions, you don't need to wait for the restore to happen. Cohesity, while the restore is happening, becomes or can be the target for your application, reading and writing while protecting that data to make sure that your application is able to get to the data in a timely fashion. It is all about time when it comes to recovering from an attack. So with this, let me just share a quick on who Cohesity is. Our mission is to help businesses simplify their data management. And the company was founded by Dr. Mohit Aran. Some of you might have heard of him. He was the co-founder and CTO of Nutanix. And before that, he was the lead engineer at Google File System. So this, at Cohesity, we call our technology as a third-generation distributed file system because Mohit did that first at Google that we all use as consumers, then at Nutanix, and now at Cohesity. As you can imagine, the team that he has built is from those companies, from Nutanix, Google, even security folks from Palo Alto Networks. The team is bringing talent from few of the biggest and most successful organizations on the planet. And as a software company, we have grown exponentially. We have grown 100% our software revenue year over year. And majority of our customers are enterprises. Over 70% of our customers are enterprises. In fact, recently, we were featured in both Gartner MQ as one of the most visionary vendors and Forrester Wave as a leader in the backup and recovery wave. So with that, I would actually open up for questions.
Yes, Raj, a great presentation. While we do some Q&A, I'm just going to bring up this poll question on the screen for the audience, and that says, what additional information would you like about the Cohesity solution? So if you have a question about Cohesity, about your data protection challenges, how Cohesity can help, now's the time to get those questions in. Let's start with the first question that came in, Raj. They're asking about the architecture, basically, of the Cohesity solution. Is it hardware and software that's deployed on premises? Does it run in the cloud? How does that work?
Sure, good question. So we are a software-defined solution, and the software is exactly the same package that you run on premises and in the public cloud. Your deployment, we offer flexibility. On premises, you can deploy on qualified appliances from HPE, Cisco, Dell, and even Cohesity. And in the public cloud, we have native integrations with AWS, Microsoft Azure, and GCP. So bringing back the flexibility aspect, you can choose to deploy the same software that gives you same user experience managed through a single console, irrespective where you choose to deploy.
Okay. So is it possible to just deploy Cohesity in the cloud and not on premises at all, or do you do both?
Absolutely. The answer is yes and yes. So yes, you can deploy it only in the cloud. We actually have customers who are cloud native, born in the cloud, and they have no presence on premises. So they run their applications in the cloud, and they protect that in the cloud through Cohesity. We have customers who are hybrid cloud, where they have applications running on premises and in the public cloud. So yes, it's both we address both the environments and even edge. Actually, we have same capabilities in the robo and edge locations.
Okay. Okay. Very nice. I like that. Here's a question. Raul is asking for the cohesity monitoring process. Will I need several people to do the job, or is it easy enough for one person to be in charge of monitoring the data protection and DR status?
Good question. So the answer is you don't need any special knowledge to manage cohesity. It goes back to the simplified experience. In fact, if I remember correctly, one of the reference customers actually came out and said when they used cohesity, or when the first time they used cohesity, it reminded them of the Apple user experience. So pretty much anyone can manage cohesity. You don't need a whole army. You can actually have resources. You can have generalists manage cohesity and also use their spare time to enhance their own capabilities, their knowledge, because you're not babysitting a solution where you have to manage job failures or take hours to recover. It's a very simplified management experience.
Very nice, very nice. Let's see. Ken is asking, does cohesity support file level restore?
Yes, we do actually, and we do across multiple data sources. In fact, let me just build on that. As a backup solution, we protect all the leading data sources from your virtual environments, your VM, Hyper-V, Nutanix, and your KVMs, physical, your Solaris, Linux, Windows, your traditional databases, your Oracle SQL, including your modern data sources, your distributed databases like NoSQL and Hadoop. We protect Kubernetes-based containerized applications and the data set. We actually protect native integrations, actually with snapshot-based integrations with your NAS vendors, your Isilons, NetApps, Fiors of the world. And actually, we talked about cloud, so Office 365. We protect all of that on a single platform, addressing the problem going back to the beginning of your session, the data growth. You're not having multiple silos, multiple point solutions for all these data sources. It's just one.
Very nice, very nice. Garrett is asking, does cohesity support dedupe and what type of dedupe?
Yeah, so we actually uniquely support global variable length sliding dedupe, which is one of the reasons why we are able to reduce the data footprint. In fact, we do data or dedupe and also compression. We support Z standard for compression, which was developed by Facebook. And we do dedupe across workloads and data sources, which is we see a lot of data footprint reduction and cost savings because of that.
Very nice, very nice. Let's see. I know we're probably running out of time here a little bit, but there's so many good questions coming in. One of the questions I want to make sure that we get to here is, this is a good one, how does cohesity stand out in the crowd compared to others?
How do cohesity stand out in the cloud compared to others? So I'm not sure
in the crowd.
In the crowd,
sorry,
okay,
in the crowd.
Sorry.
So what makes cohesity unique?
Sure. So it's let me see how I can answer that quickly, because I can spend the entire day talking about it. Starting with simplified management, it's not just about single UI, but the open API-based architecture where you can actually just manage cohesity through whatever tools you're using. It goes back to the ability to globally search. Again, these are all the architectural differentiators that make us stand apart. It's not something featured or functionality that can be added into a solution quickly. This is all built ground up. So how we do indexing that enables global search, and that's critical when you're recovering, because imagine you have archival in the cloud and you're you're forced to bring everything back on premises because you cannot bring one thing going back to the file level recovery. You actually can search and you can bring just what you need instead of bringing the entire data back. Reduces time, reduces cost, because we know how much you're going to pay when you move that data back on premises. Instant mass restore or restoring at scale. So we have done testing where you can bring hundreds of VMs within a matter of minutes instead of waiting for restore. Global variable length dedupe, again, going back to the architecture, where you can substantially reduce your global footprint because you're doing dedupe across your workloads, not just at a node level or workload level or cluster level. It is across. We actually also, which I didn't talk about, we uniquely run applications on the platform. In fact, the philosophy of the founder, Mohit Aran, was instead of moving data, because that leads to multiple things, you have to maintain a separate silo. Example, if you're doing analytics on it, you maintain a separate silo or a compute engine where you move your data. That's not just the cost, but every time you move the data, it's a security issue. So we bring compute to data. We bring the applications where the data sits directly on the platform and run applications like Splunk directly on the platform. Tenable, the example I gave you for CyberScan. Again, that is an architectural differentiator that is hard to just achieve. And the integrated cyber security that I was talking about. It's not security, it's compliance also. Looking into the data, opening it, looking for PII in it. Especially with GDPR, I thought you had a question in the beginning talking about GDPR and the new rule coming in California. In fact, I believe in New York also, where the businesses are responsible for knowing what personal information they are storing of the customers. Well, now you can. You don't need to move that data. Just run the application on the data, on Cohesity, and look for Social Security, credit card, phone numbers. So yeah, high level, these are a few that come top of mind that differentiate us from others in the space.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a great place to end the Q&A here. There are still many other technical questions for you there, Raj. I've put in the Cohesity folder for you to perhaps check out and hopefully answer. We really appreciate you being on the event today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to Cohesity for supporting the Megacast today. For more information, download the handout that's available for download right there in the Handouts tab. Make sure you check that out. It's entitled, Can You Tell If Your Data Recovery is Predictable? And with that, it's time for our first prize announcement. We have our first Amazon $500 gift card going to Peter Kelly of Virginia. Congratulations. We have our first set of AirPods going to Gothard Jansen of Texas. And second set of AirPods going to Tyler Terzigne, Terzigne, of California. Congratulations, Tyler T. of California. Lots more prizes to give away, so make sure you stay tuned. And it's now my pleasure to introduce Justin and Dale. Justin of Zerto and Dale of TierPoint. Thank you both for being on the event today. Take it away.
Thanks for having us. This is Justin Ordetz. I'm a product manager at Zerto. I've been with Zerto for the last 8 years. Previously used to be in cloud solutions architect role and support roles in my tenure here. And I actually used to work with Dale at TierPoint as their cloud architect before I moved into product management 3 years ago. And Dale, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Hey, guys, my name is Dale Levesque. I'm a director of product management here at TierPoint. I cover our recovery services, which are backup as a service and disaster recovery as a service, as well as our customer portal. I've been with TierPoint, or one of the acquired companies of TierPoint, since 2012. And before that, I was with one of the major virtualization software providers since 2003. So I think we can go ahead and hop right in. Let me get to our slides here. All right, so we're going to talk today about private cloud, and as Justin and I were talking about what we wanted to discuss here, we said, hey, you know what, we want to talk about something different that we haven't really talked about a whole lot. When you're thinking about disaster recovery as a service, a lot of times you're thinking about going into hyperscale, or you're thinking about going into a provider like TierPoint and their multi-tenant cloud, but there's not a whole lot of talk around private cloud, so we thought that was going to be a good topic. Then obviously Zerto with their CSP ecosystem, the multi-site features with Zerto, and then we're going to finish up with an example use case from a customer. So let's move on here. So private cloud. Why private cloud? Well, when you're looking at DRaaS, a lot of times, there is a cost that you're trying to get to, a price that you're trying to get to, but that's not always the case. If you think about the way DRaaS is normally positioned, I mentioned before, you're talking about going to hyperscaler where it's pay by the drip, or maybe another provider like TierPoint where it's either a subscription-based model or a reservation-based model. But a lot of times those are in multi-tenant clouds or in hyperscaler. And if you think about hyperscaler and the enterprise applications, there have been a lot of people that have gone into hyperscaler and realized their enterprise applications don't necessarily function as they'd expect once they get up there. So while it's good for some workloads, hyperscale may not work for others. In other environments, in something like a multi-tenant cloud where you go in and maybe it's vCloud Director backed, yes, you can pay by the usage, but what we found is a lot of our customers, they actually like to have a consistent spend model. So that pay by the drink doesn't always lend itself to a consistent spend model, and especially when you're going in and testing, so on a monthly basis, if you're just consuming storage and maybe and some bandwidth for your replication, that's relatively consistent. But the general recommendations are test at least once a year, but really you should be testing once a quarter. So when you're spinning up those machines to test, you may incur additional charges. And then of course, once you fail over, there's going to be charges for the compute that you're using. So having a private cloud really gives you a predictable spend where you can take this environment, similar to what you would have in your own four walls, and allows you to build that environment to your specifications, allows you to run those persistent workloads in there. Maybe you have your Active Directory server, or maybe you're doing some always-on replication. You can have that in the environment, and your spend remains the same, outside of maybe some VMware licensing, what have you. So really just that consistent spend is a good point. Another good point is noisy neighbor. Think about it this time of year. Black Friday just hit. If you're in the same cloud as somebody else that's consuming a lot of resources, there's usually walls and barriers put up so that they can't consume all of the resources. But if you have 3, 4, 5, 6 providers that are trying to burst up and use a lot of resources, that may actually limit your ability to fail over in the performance of your application. So you don't have to worry about that in a private cloud scenario. So that makes it nice there. The other thing, too, you have to think of is in most of the multi-tenant clouds, especially with providers like TierPoint, they're based on vCloud Director. Some are based on vCenter, but vCloud Director is generally what service providers are using as their underlying, that it sits on top of ESX and vCenter. And not all technologies that you may be using for your disaster recovery business continuity plans may integrate well with VCD. So you may need that flexibility or that ability to plug directly into vCenter without going through the vCloud Director piece. Finally, another use case we've seen a lot too is desktops. And I don't mean the desktops themselves necessarily, because that's a great, desktops in a multi-tenant cloud is a great use case. But if you think about the typical way that you set up desktops, virtualized infrastructure, and you're failing over, a lot of times it makes a lot of sense to keep heavy storage in a private cloud. So you have all of your images that are replicating, that get replicated there, maybe via backup, and then you're using Zerto or another DRaaS data mover to replicate your provisioning servers and the other infrastructure. And that can remain steady in your private cloud and then spin up workloads either in, or desktops, in that private cloud or or multi-tenant cloud, depending on what you have. Also, if you think about high-performance workloads, there may be times where the providers they have to limit you based on some of the limits of the underlying technologies or blade sizes that they have in their cloud. So if you have high-performance workloads that are very very compute sensitive, right? They may need a lot of compute, and you want to fail over, once that DRaaS environment becomes your production environment, you may need that. So that's where private cloud may come in well too. And then flexibility on versioning, this is huge. So if you look at what happens a lot of times is maybe a customer wants to upgrade to the latest version of Zerto, right? So we may have a standard version in our multi-tenant cloud, which is one version behind because we need to make sure there's stability in the platform, especially at scale. But you need the new features of the most latest version that's out there. That could be said for Zerto, that could be said for VMware, maybe it's hardware versions in VMware. So being able to pick and choose the software levels that your environment's at and not be dictated by the provider is also another reason why private cloud's good. So those are reasons why private cloud. Now, with private cloud, some of those the benefits of that are the choice of hypervisor. You're not just kind of ingrained with only VMware. Maybe you need something that takes Hyper-V. Maybe you prefer VMware on Nutanix or Nutanix directly. Or maybe you have a hyper-converged infrastructure preference. Maybe you like VxRails and all the automation that can happen with VxRails. So it gives you a choice of, really a very granular choice of what you can do in those environments. Before I mentioned high-performance workloads and compute, but what if you have specific storage needs, something like, hey, I need a really fast Pure array, or, hey, maybe I don't. Maybe I just want really cheap storage via vSAN. That gives you, the option there to really be flexible on your storage cost and performance. Then you also have locations. So for us, to your point, we have over 40 data centers in the United States, but we only have 10 that offer multi-tenant DRaaS. Well, everybody was talking about edge, this year, and that's a big thing. So if you need your DRaaS environment very close to a specific location, and some customers want to go very far away from their production environment, and some want to stay very close. So if you want to stay very close and be very close, maybe have a metro link into your DRaaS environment. This really gives you the location, the ability to move and pick and choose where you want to host your disaster recovery as a service. And then, of course, the firewalling. You may have a Juniper firewall or something else that you prefer to use that the provider doesn't necessarily support in their multi-tenant or in the hyperscale, so giving you a choice. And then you still want to be able to retain the ability to scale out. So in the case with TierPoint, yes, you have this dedicated infrastructure, but what we see a lot of our large enterprise customers do is they have a mix of environments. They'll say, hey, you know what? I know I have my high-performance workloads, my super critical workloads. We're going to put those into private cloud. And then for those other machines, we're going to connect that private cloud into a multi-tenant cloud or into subscription-based DR and then be able to burst. So really giving you the flexibility of all of those three. I hope this made sense on that piece. And I will hand it over to Justin now to talk more about Zerto.
All right, thanks so much, Dale. So to just give a really high-level kind of overview of who Zerto is and what we do, basically we provide a simple, flexible platform for all of your IT resilience needs, such as business continuity, data or application mobility, and cloud agility. To your points, one of our partners, we work with a very large network of over 350 different service providers worldwide. I think several of which are also presenting during the Megacast today. And basically, our software-only solution installs on your local or cloud-based infrastructure, and it enables data replication for both short and long-term data retention use cases. So this world-class engine allows you to replicate any workload on any physical infrastructure to a variety of different virtual and cloud-based solutions, while simultaneously achieving the lowest recovery point or recovery time objectives. Now, for our Zerto provider partners, they leverage this best-of-breed technology and kind of an extra layer of additional features that allow them to create multi-tenancy, enable self-service, and really manage things at scale, as Dale had alluded to. So these kind of give those foundational building blocks, along with the flexibility of the software itself to create a variety of different services. So we were just introduced to the private cloud service, the TierPoint's offering, and the different, services and service level objectives that might be bundled in there. And really, at the end of the day, the focus on this is to, allow you, the customer, to replicate those workloads, regardless of where they might live, and make sure that you guys can achieve whatever the, needs and requirements of your organization might be. Now, noted on the slide that I have here, we can see that we can really kind of group these into kind of really two high-level buckets, so to speak. One being disaster recovery as a service, where a user is replicating from their local or hyperscale cloud platform to one of our Zerto service providers, or what we call in-cloud disaster recovery services. And that's where you might have workloads that are on a TierPoint private cloud or within a multi-tenant cloud at one of our service providers, and they replicate to other resources within that service provider ecosystem. Now, the key thing here is when you're working with the Zerto service provider, all of your Zerto-related, usage billing is by default consolidated through the provider partner, and you'll get one single bill from that provider partner. Now, alternatively, if you do happen to already have a Zerto license, or if you'd prefer to purchase a Zerto license, this can really help, you subsidize that cost since you've already, paid that Zerto cost. Basically, we have that flexibility where whatever makes the most sense for, you and your organization, how you guys prefer to consume and pay for things, whether if it's OpEx or CapEx. This really kind of gives you guys that flexibility to, kind of leverage our best-of-breed technology while also, paying for it in the way that is, preferred by your team. Now, as I'm sure as you can imagine, there's a variety of different cost differences between our, different 350 service providers worldwide. And really, this is reflective of the level of service and the related service level objectives that they're providing. I usually like to refer to this as, being any color of the rainbow. So on one side of the spectrum, you might have more of like a white glove service where the every aspect of the service, even beyond Zerto, might be fully managed by the service provider, all the way to the other side of the spectrum where things are more self-service, where, you, the administrator, get to log in, choose what's protected, for how long, things of that nature. And really this kind of flexibility is, I think, why a lot of service providers have, worked with Zerto, and we're going to continue investing in that area of our business because ultimately different companies, different organizations have different needs. Some people don't have the expertise at the time to figure out different platforms, and this is why they'll usually work with our service providers, on those varying levels of the spectrum there. So in a little bit, we'll hear about a real customer example from Dale, a customer success story with Zerto and TierPoint. But first, I want to show a really basic example where a customer has an application that's replicating twice. Once locally, and then a second time to a Zerto service provider. So in this example, the first replication is to local resources. This might be within your data center, within your colo, or something like that. And typically, a lot of our customers are doing this for more operational or day-to-day use cases. So the copy could be used for a variety of different needs, such as point-in-time local recovery, maybe after a failed application upgrade. Or maybe it's for local recovery testing that your application team might want to run on the fly. Or maybe you wanted to do file level restore because somebody accidentally deleted something just a few minutes ago, and you don't want to have to download it over the wire. You want to be able to get to it, from your local replication. Or maybe you wanted to create a local clone from an hour ago, and you're going to use that as a new test dev environment for a new engineer that was hired. There's a variety of different use cases for why people might want to replicate locally. And you, the user, can really kind of set that and configure that as you'd like. Since it's local to you, no holes barred, you basically have the options and flexibility there. And that can even go into extended long-term retention. So, maybe you're doing something where you want to offload that local replication to more long-term retained data set. Maybe you're doing that weekly or monthly or something of that nature. Lots of different use cases there. For the second replication to a Zerto service provider, like to your point, kind of a similar talk track, right? You still get a lot of that flexibility, but now you kind of have the opportunity to be consuming a different set of resources. So maybe your team is really compute starved or storage starved. Maybe you guys have an internal initiative to, lower your CapEx costs and move more towards operating expenses. Or maybe it's just really focusing on what's core to your business. Folks like TierPoint and other providers, they're really in the data center business. That is part of their bread and butter, as well as providing those kind of best-of-breed services and choosing best-of-breed solutions. So it really kind of helps take a lot of the guessing out of the game. And maybe for that second replication, maybe for the first one, you're only doing, 1 or 2 hours of point-in-time recovery where you can dial back to. But maybe for the copy that's going to the provider, maybe that's for a much longer period of time. Maybe it's for 5 days or 7 days or 2 weeks or something like that. This is really where we see a lot of our customers working with our providers because, as you build out that local replication or, now what would be that remote replication, it's going to consume more storage. And sometimes you need an added level of flexibility there. And usually that's something that is really hard to accomplish locally, but something that's a lot easier to accomplish with one of our service providers. Actually, to even go back to the other example too about the cloned application, another really low-hanging fruit where maybe your engineering or development team is hiring a lot faster than you had anticipated. We all know what it's like, those long poles in the tent when it comes to getting more server and storage hardware racked and stacked and acquired. It's never as quick as we'd all like it to be. And this could be an instance where maybe that new test dev instance is going to be on the remote resources provided through the Zerto service provider. Just a couple of really basic examples. I hope you guys can really kind of see the value and the flexibility. Where in this one case where you could replicate locally or to a provider. Up next, though, Dale's going to show us how he had a real customer who replicated more than once, and it's for a very different use case. It was mostly around migration. So, Dale, I'll kick it back over to you.
Thanks, Justin. And as Justin mentioned, everyone, there's a number of different use cases for the one-to-many feature, but from what I've seen, at least the one that I get pinged on the most is around migrations. And this is something that we see whether a customer is migrating into TierPoint or migrating from one of their own data centers into another and is using TierPoint for disaster recovery. In this case, we had a medical supply manufacturer, a very large manufacturer, and they were number one, they were doing two things. First of all, they wanted to outsource DRaaS, disaster recovery as a service, and then they also wanted to move into a provider's co-location facility and have a private cloud. I mentioned all the benefits of private cloud before, but just to refresh your memory, it's that dedicated compute stack and storage stack that's virtualized out there. So they wanted to, their challenges were they wanted to migrate into basically two of TierPoint's data centers. Data Center 1, and we're not going to go into any specifics of which ones those were, but Data Center 1 was going to be for production, and then Data Center 2 was their DRaaS environment. And one of their business requirements was, hey, their disaster recovery solution that they had at the time wasn't up to their internal compliance needs. So they needed to get on disaster recovery as a service quickly. So getting all of their machines basically into replication, tested and protected. What they did is they used the one-to-many in this case, and they had their original production environment set up. We installed Zerto in that environment and started replicating to their DRaaS environment. At the same time, we built their private cloud production environment and then started replicating into that. Same VMs from their original production environment, right? So from their environment that they were going to decommission. So they're going into two separate data centers using that multi-site license. And then from there, they wanted to be able to test. So, they wanted to obviously keep the production environment up until they were very confident that the new production environment was going to work. And this is where the DRaaS data movers, and especially Zerto, does really well, because it allows customers to test live while still replicating data and then fail over, or in this case we call it fail over, but basically move production over at a click of a button within minutes. And they did that. So they went in, they started replicating to both locations. So then from there, they tested their new production environment while changes were still replicating into the journal itself, and then failed over. Once they failed over, they did have to protect the new environment, because now that's the new good environment. Well, all that work that they did in the DRaaS environment didn't go away. The good thing about Zerto is that you can seed the data, and since it was virtually the same VMs, basically they just created the new VPGs in Zerto, pointed them at the new VMs, and then used the old VMDKs as the seed. So bringing and really getting replication back online within a couple hours, and not having to replicate those whole VMs over. Now, this is just one example, and I know we're bumping against time, so I want to be cognizant of that. But there's other examples where customers are doing a hardware refresh, and they're already using DRaaS, and they want to do multi-tenant sites. So there's a whole lot of use cases just under the migration heading that can be used, or that can be done with Zerto. And then having that private cloud or even a multi-tenant cloud, the flexibility in those really helps a lot. All right. So I think we can go to the questions now.
Excellent. Yeah, great presentation, Justin and Dale. Let's bring up this poll question for the audience while we do some Q&A. That just says, what additional information would you like about the Zerto or TierPoint solution? So let's see. First question that came in here, they're asking about is VPGs. Maybe this is a question for Justin. I know you mentioned VPGs. What is a VPG, and how does it help? What does it do?
Yeah, great question. So this is Justin, and basically VPG stands for Virtual Protection Group. So the easiest way to think about this is it's basically a logical construct in Zerto that lets you select which VMs are going to be replicated and recovered together. So there's really kind of two parts to the protection group, right? One is, which VMs are in it? They can be on any host. They can be spread across any data stores. If you're local in your Hyper-V or VMware environment. It's kind of the first aspect. And the second is, where am I going to replicate to, and what are my SLA settings? So we really kind of give you that best of both worlds, right, where you get to choose which VMs replicate, and they don't have any constraints around having to be on the same hosts or hardware or anything of that nature. But we still give you that point-in-time recovery that you might be able to formally get with a solution that might be more of like an array-based replication solution. With that, we also allow a lot of, kind of extra things that you can configure as part of the group. So those could be things like which order you want the VMs to be booted in when they're recovered. If you wanted to use a specific network on a specific NIC, or if you wanted to do any re-IPing, we also allow you to configure a completely separate profile for any of those network settings for a failover test. But basically, it's that atomic unit that controls, that cross-VM, cross-disk point-in-time consistency, and then what the recovery plan is going to look like for that workload.
Okay, excellent. Another question here, Chris is asking, what platforms are supported? Is Hyper-V supported for protection?
Yeah, absolutely. So from Zerto perspective, we support VMware. In addition to that, we also support vCloud Director for our service provider partners. We support Hyper-V System Center Virtual Machine Manager. Outside of that, obviously, there's the network of service providers I alluded to before. And from a hyperscale cloud platform, we support Azure and AWS. Okay.
And maybe this is a question for Dale. I'll just sum this one up. It's basically like, how would we get started? I mean, if somebody has data, maybe multiple data centers. They want to protect them, using to your point. What are the steps?
So first off, you're gonna, call our or get in contact with one of our sales folks, and they're gonna bring an SE in. From there, what they're gonna do is take a look at your environment and then suggest, and business needs, by the way, not just environment, but everything at a holistic view, and then suggest what may work best for you, or what will work best for you, whether that is the multi-tenant cloud resources or the private cloud resources. And then from there, as we go into implementations, obviously we'll start protecting those environments and then performing any migrations that have to happen. But when we're designing a solution, it's very hands-on, it's very intensive. Our solutions engineers really dig into your environment, try to pull the stats out of there. A lot of times, if you need a business continuity plan written, we can handle something like that. Even if you need environment assessments done, we can offer those as professional services as well. Sometimes environments are so complex that you don't understand your change rates. You don't understand how all your applications are talking to one another. You may not even understand what can be virtualized and what can't. So, it's definitely, depending on the size of your organization, it really depends on the scope of work needed to get you started.
Excellent. Yeah, great answers, great presentation. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for our live Q&A, but I did put a number of more technical questions there for both of you in the Zerto TierPoint folder. So, of course, we appreciate your help with those. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Dale. Thanks for being on the event today.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. For more information, check out the Joint Solutions brief that's there in the Handouts tab. It says Zerto/TierPoint. You can download that and learn more about the Zerto and TierPoint solution. And now it's time for our next prize announcement. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Amy Cox of Oklahoma. Congratulations, Amy Cox. We have AirPods number 3 going to Rob Russell from Illinois. AirPod number 4 going to Lee Gong from California. And AirPod number 5 going to Christian Valerio from California as well. I will post the winners' names in the chat box because I know I ran through them very quickly there, but we got a lot of prize winners, and we have a lot more great presentations still today. So let's keep the Megacast rolling. I'm excited to introduce now our next presenter on the event today from iLand. That is Mr. Will Urban, Senior Marketing Technologist. Will, thank you for being on.
No, thank you guys very much for having me, and thanks everybody for taking time out for today. A lot of good companies, a lot of good content. I've got a ton of stuff to talk through, and with all the other ones, please feel free to write in the Q&A, and if we can't get to it during the live presentation, I'll hang around afterwards, and we'll go from there. So let's go ahead and quickly get started. So the presentation we're doing is Comprehensive Data Protection and IT Resilience with Veeam Solutions from iLand. And, the whole idea is about disaster recovery and business continuity and IT resilience and whatever buzzword you want to use. We're going to use them all, don't worry, trust me. But we're really going to talk about how the different solutions work and how they really kind of provide, best in breed, best in class solution to protect all of your different layers of data. Now, iLand, I'll talk a little bit about us later, so I'll kind of skip this for now. But we do a whole bunch of stuff as a secure cloud platform, including backup as a service, disaster recovery as a service, and you'll see how that kind of plays into this whole message. So I love this quote, and I promise I won't read every single slide I have for you guys, but you know this more than anybody. The IT landscape is constantly changing. Every year, and we're almost about to hit 2020, there are new innovations, new opportunities, and especially new risks. And those risks are what are causing us to have these long conversations about disaster recovery, IT resilience, backups, everything like that. Companies are seeking the latest strategies to adapt, secure, and protect their mission-critical data, and they're turning to the cloud to go beyond the physical limits of data protection in traditional environments. That's a big, long phrase of us just saying, like, hey, cloud is a solution that can help you tackle some of these challenges that you're here for today, and that's what we're going to kind of talk about. Now, this is the scary stuff, right? And everybody knows that, but it's pretty nasty out there. 2019 was rough. 2018 was rough. Whether you're into legal and compliance and GDPR fines and breach issues and ransomware and crypto locker and penetration and denial of service. I mean, there's some bad stuff happening out there, and everybody's aware of it. And the challenge with that is even more so is you need to have kind of that IT resilience to be able to meet your customers' demands, your customers' needs, no matter what happens. And there's some bad stuff out there, and that's, honestly, it's an arms race. And so while there's an entire other conversation that you should be having about protecting your security and security in depth and policies and procedures with training your users and your customers and your people and, how do you prevent malware from even infiltrating and all that stuff, you have this entire, onion layer of defense at depth for security. But then on top of that, you also need to have this entire comprehensive, solution for recovery in case something bad happens. And really it comes down to the fact that your data is your lifeblood and you need to protect it. Whether it's compliance and legal, you need to protect it from everything, being able to access it at any time. Human error is a huge one, right? How many times has, from an internal perspective, has somebody called and said, hey, I can't find this, or accidentally deleted it? Human error from unplugging a cable to deleting an entire shared folder, it happens. You have to be able to recover from that. External threats, this is the really big one. This is the one that gets the notifications on the news and people see it. 22 Texas small towns were impacted by ransomware and CryptoLocker. Hospitals have to turn away patients because they can't access patient information. There's some really bad stuff out there. It happens. There's so many things to do to prevent yourself and to protect yourself, but then you also need to be recoverable if something bad happens. Internal threats, malicious users. We hate to think that anybody in our organizations would even think about doing something malicious. But you hear these stories, somebody goes and they delete all of the files, then they delete all the backups, and then they delete all of the DR, or they wreck the replication, right? So how do you prevent yourself and how do you protect yourself from a malicious user or even worse, a malicious administrator? Policy gaps, long-term archival, legal issues, legal ramifications. If you're a global company nowadays, you're talking about GDPR and you're talking about all these compliance issues and attestations and certifications that you need to abide by. And, if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I need to put a illegal hold on, any emails from this person from 3 years ago and you don't have that information, that's not good. You need to make sure you can protect yourself and recover in the case of something like that. And then, like I said, legal compliance, depending on if you're regulated government organizations or whatever. All of this are, the multiple myriad ways and reasons why you need to be able to protect your data and recover your data, not just ransomware, not just I accidentally deleted something. Now, you can probably go online and find all kinds of, cost calculators and how much does a breach cost and how much does ransomware cost and all this stuff. And there's so many different studies out there, and the answer is it's a lot, right? We all know that, the cost of ransomware is rising, the cost of malicious attacks is rising. But not only that, the cost of cyber insurance is skyrocketing. Nowadays, if you go to your cyber insurance company and say, hey, I need to get a new insurance policy for 2020, and they say, okay, well, great, show me your plan for protection, remediation, and recovery. And if you're like, well, I don't really have one of those, well, watch the cost of that go up, right? So you need to not only have a plan for, protecting, but also a remediation and recovery. And a lot of organizations are looking into both the financial aspect, but more so than the financial aspect is think about what happens if there's an outage for you. What are some of the intangible costs of this, right? So, think about it yourself. I mean, as when we approach IT, we approach our infrastructure and all the things that we do for our business, you have to sometimes put on your consumer hat and say, well, what happens to me if I go to my favorite website and it's down? If I want to go buy this product and it's not available, I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to do something else. I'm not going to sit around and wait. I'm not going to give them the benefit of the doubt or keep checking back for a week. I have stuff to do in my own personal life. Like, this is what I'm going to do. Think about those intangible costs to your organization if you are out for some reason, for whatever reason. The perception your customers have, both internal and external, right? How many times does an executive say, "Oh, that system went down again"? Well, that figures. That's not a good feeling to have as an IT person. Brand loyalty, customer loyalty. Once you start talking about both internal and external people losing confidence and losing loyalty in your application or your offering, do they start implementing shadow IT? Do they start doing their own stuff? So there's a whole myriad of reasons on why you need to protect and recover all that, right? And that's kind of a little bit what we're addressing. And the answer is there's no simple solution. Like, I wish I had one button that I could just say, hey, push this button, and you're good to go. You can protect everything you have. And we all know that that's not realistic, right? So the idea being that you have to have this comprehensive suite of data protection and solutions. And it really starts with this idea, this rule of 3-2-1. And we've probably heard about this a million times. You want 3 copies of your data, you want it across 2 different types of media, and you want one to be off-site air-gapped. And what does that mean? Well, if you're doing backups to disk and this is the same SAN system that your production system works on and the SAN goes down or the power goes down, well, you really haven't protected yourself, right? And likewise with this off-site air-gapped copy, you want some level of that data to be somewhere else, so that there's CryptoLocker software out there that will know actually scan for VBK files or backup files or local drives and where backups could be stored and nuke those. But yet it can't get to your tape, or it can't get to your cloud provider or anything like that. So you want to make sure that from just a data protection perspective, you have multiple copies of that data. And then, it can't just stop there, right? So you have to build this broad data protection solution. And it starts with backup. And so these are some of the products that Island offers, but it's an idea being that the Veeam suite of solutions gives you this entire portfolio of stuff. So you don't have to have 9 different tools and all these different web UIs and all these different licenses. You literally can protect your entire environment with the Veeam set of tools, along with both local and cloud provider like Island. So, it starts with local data protection with backups. Then you have Secure Cloud Backup, which gives you that air-gapped offsite cloud-based replica for backup recovery purposes. And the reason why that's important is because, I could have, hours and hours and hours of conversation about, do you still continue to use tape drives, and what happens if your tape drive library goes down, and what happens if you can't recover, and what if it's in a warehouse and you can't get to, and, when do you make that leap from physical-based media like a tape to something like a cloud-based hardware-agnostic, solution? And then beyond that, you have things like object storage, which is a long-term capacity tier. And there's a whole bunch of really cool technologies that Veeam does about letting you give an understanding of how you actually say this data can be, long-term archived, or this is going to be recoverable, or this is going to be over here. Leveraging things like, Veeam SOBR, which is a, scale-out backup repository, and giving it, policies for moving data to cloud or moving data to cold. All that stuff is all available for you to really just have a more fine-tuned control of where your data and all your backups live. And then beyond backups, right, because backups are not the only thing that you need to do in your environment. And in fact, you can't. I'll talk about that in a second. You move to disaster recovery. Cloud-based disaster recovery is huge. And because what it really does is, I've been doing this for forever. And, back in the old days when you had dark fiber between buildings and you had secondary site and you had multiple pieces of hardware redundancy, and but you had hardware contracts and renewals and all that. It was unattainable for most organizations, right? But now cloud comes along, and all of a sudden cloud is all about scale and agility and purchase what you need and only use what you need. Now all of a sudden disaster recovery can be available to anybody, right? So that's really important. And then as more and more organizations start looking at, these SaaS applications, the big one is, Office 365, right? Most people are saying, well, I don't want to run Exchange and SharePoint and file servers on site anymore, so I'm going to do some Office 365 stuff, those same levels of data protection and disaster recovery and IT resilience strategies still play into this. You still need to protect that data, because if somebody deletes an email, or if the email is 9 months old and the person's left the company, there's some timeout retentions that are built into the product that you may not be aware of, and now when you need to go find legal discovery or anything like that on that data, it no longer exists, right? So with a single solution of Veeam plus Island, you can actually accomplish all of these challenges and all of these goals. So let's talk real quick about all of that. I got my little timer going, so I know how much time I have left. So I know I'm talking really fast. We got a ton of stuff, but there's some really good information for you guys. So the first thing starts with the Island Secure Backup as a Service, leveraging Veeam's, Veeam Cloud Connect. So basically what happens is Veeam Cloud Connect is your backup software, runs on site, creates backups of your virtual machines or your agent-based machines as well, and then you can put it locally, right? So you have a hard drive, you've got shared storage, you've got a NAS, you've got whatever. So you make your local backup, and your local backup is good for everything, right? VM goes down, or I need to recover a file from a user, et cetera, et cetera. But then what happens is, by leveraging an encrypted tunnel from your site to the cloud, it will actually create a replica copy of that backup and send the backup off-site. So that achieves a couple of different things. One, the first thing is now it's air-gapped, right, so nobody can touch it. It's encrypted in flight and in rest, so nobody can mess with it. And then what happens is, once it resides inside of a cloud environment, you got all kinds of cool things you can do. You can recover it for disaster recovery. You can bring back files, you can bring back entire virtual machines, etc. Now, remember how earlier I talked a little bit about malicious users and how sometimes that can be a challenge? One of the cool things about this solution is there's an idea called insider protection. So now insider protection is almost kind of like another preventative layer between even malicious administrators and your backups. So you've got this ransomware. This ransomware comes in. It locks all your files. It destroys all of your local backup files, but it can't get to the cloud because of the encryption. So that's cool. Now you've got a malicious administrator who comes in. They delete all your files. They delete all of your backups. They delete all your cloud backups. However, they can't touch the basically copies of the copies using insider protection. So there's one more level of protection for even against a malicious insider or malicious administrator. Now, no matter what you're using, whether it's cloud backup, disaster recovery, Office 365 integration, the last thing you want to do is be bouncing across multiple panes of glass and all these different interfaces and everything. So one of the cool things that we have is the Island Secure Cloud Console, and all of the Veeam solutions are integrated into it. So you can manage your billing, you can manage your users, you can manage, if you're a cloud service provider, or a managed service provider, and you're providing these services to your users, you can actually manage your tenants and all of that stuff. Everything from billing to performance to automation and administration and everything like that can all be seen within the console, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But we also have more content around that, like on our YouTube videos and stuff. Complete control of your object storage buckets, right? So you have the ability to kind of browse your object storage buckets and also see which pieces belong to where. Obviously it's a little bit different if you're an administrator versus just a regular user. You can leverage different tools to go in and out beyond just the backup software, but you can use it like traditional S3 compatible storage, or you could leverage it for your backups or your SOBR type policies as well. And then, secure cloud backup for Office 365 with Veeam. Again, you are leveraging Veeam, or you're leveraging Office 365 to now do emails and SharePoint and OneDrive and all this stuff. You need to protect it just like you protect everything else from any myriad of things. And so you have to go through that process of setting it up, configuring it. But then once you have it configured, now when someone says, hey, I lost that email, or hey, I need to download this person's archive for legal hold or remediation or anything like that, it's all available. You can download it into a PST. You can download the individual files into zip. You can recover it back to the cloud. You can recover it to somebody else's mailbox if they've left the company or whatever. So a lot of different protection and recovery opportunities and options within all of that software as well. So I talked a little bit about this, but why do I need to back up my SaaS data? Obviously, the cloud is responsible for things like uptime and a service availability and all that stuff. But most of the time, when you look at your contracts, the cloud is not responsible for Susan's email to the president about the stock price or something like that, right? So if something like that goes missing or deleted or anything like that, you need to be able to recover that, and you need to be able to make sure that you can have that for either compliance or legal hold or whatever. And so protecting your SaaS offering as you do your on-site infrastructure is just as important. But backups are not enough, right? True IT resilience lies in the ability to quickly recover your organization. Because think about it, right? If you have, you've taken your backup at 9 o'clock at night every night, and then you've got a power outage for 3 days, well, it doesn't do you any good, right? You need to recover your entire organization, usually somewhere else. Now, in the past, though, it's been easier to say to do DR than it has been to do it because, setting up an entire DR site and configuring replication and buying hardware and 3-year maintenance and all that stuff, training staff, doing testing and failovers and all that stuff, that it got crazy and it got, to the point where most people just couldn't do it, right? And so cloud comes along, disaster recovery as a service, you don't have any upfront capital expenses, you're not buying redundant hardware, you allow yourself to have the geographical redundancy for, if I live in Florida and we're prone to hurricanes, my DR site can be in Texas or something to that effect. It can also allow you to tackle those global regulations that you may not know of. Like, you have a data center that is in Australia, it can only replicate to another location in Australia, even if you have a home headquarters in the United States, because of various different legal and compliance rules across the country and across the world, etc. The other good thing about disaster recovery as a service from a cloud-based perspective is automation, virtualization, encapsulation. All of that allows you to begin to test, to automate, to script, to orchestrate, and to report on all of these different things. Now, I'm just keeping track of my time, so I want to make sure I cover the whole thing. We have so much information about disaster recovery as a service, and in fact, one of the biggest things that we leverage is the Veeam console on-site, provides that single pane of glass into all your backups and Office 365 and disaster recovery. And then on our side, we have the ability to never lose visibility or management from your cloud perspective. And it's all based on the Island Secure Cloud console with the ability to create recovery groups and run books and automation and orchestration and scripting and reporting and management and all that stuff. So with less than a minute, let me just talk real quick about Island. Our focus is on your success. We want to make sure that we can simplify your journey to the cloud, elevate your experience with our support and our capabilities. We have a full portfolio of products that we can support you with, whether it's backup as a service, infrastructure as a service, disaster recovery. When it comes to compliance and security, we have a gob of attestations and certifications across the board. We're all over the world when you look at where we're at. And one of the biggest things is from disaster recovery as a service, we've been in the leader quadrant for the last 4 years from Gartner. We have gobs of awards from all of our great partners, from Veeam Partner of the Year, innovation winners, VMworld, Zerto, channel partners, Forrester, et cetera, et cetera. And that's my 20 minutes. I will stick around and hang out and answer a bunch of questions that I've seen come through on the chat, but I won't be able to do it verbally just because I want to keep us on track. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a wonderful afternoon. We look forward to talking to you guys more. Check out our YouTube. Check out the handout that we have for you guys. And with that, I'll take a breath and thank you very much and have a wonderful holiday season and everything like that.
Great presentation, Will. Really appreciate all the good info. Trying to stay on schedule. Just a couple questions here before you go. And obviously we have a lot of electronic questions here. I'm going to put in your folder as well because they came in while you were presenting. Christopher's asking, can I do a single file level restore from a backup to a live test environment?
So that's a great question. So the answer is yes, and there's multiple different things you can do. So depends on, if you're doing SaaS-based, like so if you've got Office 365, or Exchange or SharePoint. You can take individual files, you can take individual emails, you can take individual mailboxes, you can take entire SharePoint sites. If you're talking about virtual machines, you can replace an entire VMDK, you can replace the entire virtual machine, you can replace or restore individual files. You can do it both to its original spot, you can overwrite it, you can rename it, or you can put it into like a test location or like a sandbox. And then you can also just download it and manually move it. So so the answer is yes, and there's like 9 to 12 different ways of doing that, depending on what type of file it is, what you're trying to accomplish, where you're trying to put it, does it require a legal hold, immutability, all that stuff is all part of that. But yes is the answer.
Okay, awesome. Let's see, another question here. They say they're working on a federal project with government data. How do I know that my data is safe in the cloud? Any recommendations on that?
Yeah, so that's an awesome question, and the answer is always you have. So there's this whole idea of there's these business executive like reports. So okay, at a high level, right? So for Island's sake, we have a dedicated compliance and legal team. We have, I showed you earlier, we have all of these attestations and certifications based on what, compliance regulatory committees we abide by. So the first thing, regardless of who you are, you have to find out what it is that your particular field is requiring. Is it SOX? Is it PCI DSS? Is it HIPAA? Is it FERPA? Like all that stuff you have to find out. And so you always, but whenever you go to the cloud, regardless of whose cloud you're going to, you always want to make sure your InfoSec team, your CISO, all of those teams are early on, because they're the ones that are going to say, the last thing you want to do is spend 3 months investigating cloud and then somebody say, oh, well, they don't have this attestation, so you can't go there because we'll get fined millions of dollars, right? You don't want to have that happen. You start the conversation with what are the things we have to abide by? What are the government regulatory concerns? What are we bound by? What are the fines? What are the penalties? Then you go with that information and you first whittle down who has that, and then who has the teams that can help you create those business plans and create those attestation reports and the certifications and the audits and all the stuff like that. That's how you, and obviously speaking from us, we have that partnership with the customer. We have a compliance team that their whole job is to figure that out and then make sure that we're the right fit, and if we're not the right fit, we'll help you understand that. So whenever you go to the cloud, you have to have that understanding of the compliance and legal certifications and attestations that you must abide by first, and that's going to dictate where you can go, and then from there you start looking into the other things. How am I going to get there? Where's it going to go? What are my immutability plans? What are the attestations and the certifications and the auditing and all this stuff? So it's a hard question to answer because every organization is different, every legal team is different. You could have a company that is based out of the U.S. and does business in Germany, and they have completely set of different laws than somebody who has a company in the United States that does business out of Japan, right? So you have to have that understanding. You have to bring those InfoSec people in way earlier than you're used to. Otherwise, the project's going to stall. So hopefully that answered or helped.
Absolutely. Yeah, great advice. And then let's see, last question we probably have time for is there a way to try Island before I buy it?
Awesome question. So just like pretty much everybody out in the world, right, you want to know what you're getting into before you sink your money into it. So if you go to island.com/free, you can sign up and check out our Cloud Connect trial, which is basically allows you to leverage the free backup as a service. You can try disaster recovery as a service for free, object storage. You can sign up for multiple of the different services. And like the whole idea behind this whole presentation and our whole comprehensive solution is, if you have Veeam, you can actually leverage all of that stuff and try them all out with the cloud without too much impact to your existing day-to-day. And that's the best part about cloud, virtualization, encapsulation, et cetera, is, you can start these products and projects and you can verify and validate without it actually impacting the things that you're doing today to make sure that you can quickly swap over to it as your prime means of data protection and IT resilience.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's all the time we have for our live Q&A, but there's still a number of questions there for you there, Will, in the queue. Thank you for being on the event today.
Thank you, guys.
For more information on the Island Beam solution, check out the handout that's available for download there in your audience console. And like Will said, you can try out the solution for yourself over at island.com. All right, now it's time for our next set of prize winners. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Puneet Badlani from Illinois. Congratulations, Puneet Badlani from Illinois. And then we have our next set of AirPods going to Howard Lee of Texas, John Krenz of New Jersey, and John Gaines of Wisconsin. Congratulations to all the prize winners. More prizes to come, so stay tuned for that. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the next presenter on today's Data Protection and Disaster Recovery Megacast. That is Mr. Peter Elliman, Director of Product Marketing at Druva. Peter, are you there?
I am, yes, thank you.
Thanks for being on the event. Take it away.
Thanks so much. Hope I can share something new with the folks on the team here. I know you're hearing from a lot of different providers today, and so feel free to submit questions as you go along, kind of the usual drill. Look, I'm here to talk to you about cloud-based data protection and why it's something you need to be considering if you're not already thinking about it. The first reason, which you probably already know, but we like to emphasize, is that workloads are evolving. And so being ready for the future, for where those workloads are going, is a big part of how you can move both your own professional career forward, but more importantly, helping the company as well. And starting back right from what customers used to do, and this is where a lot of the legacy providers often excel, is with sort of the basic bare metal machines, of course, and virtual machines. But if you look at what your company is doing on their own journey to the cloud, they are increasingly building out a hybrid environment. And they may be lifting and shifting some applications into the cloud, and they may be starting to use things like containers or even other serverless capabilities to build that next set of applications. And so ideally, you want a data protection platform that can really be part of the cloud infrastructure, the fabric that you're building and that you're going to rely on moving forward. The other thing that we certainly hear about in the news and is increasingly impacting companies and even the data protection infrastructure itself is, of course, cyber threats, and then, of course, just regulations. So there's been a huge spend increase, I should say, on data protection itself. And I think that's being driven both by data, but also by some of these threats and companies looking to further fortify, right, how they can prevent things like, or not prevent, but certainly protect themselves against things like ransomware. So, in just earlier this year, in March of 2019, right, a Norwegian company, Norsk Hydro, right, suffered a $40 million loss related to ransomware. I mean, even right here in the U.S., the city of Atlanta, as many people may know, faced a similar element. Delta Airlines as well, frankly, had made a huge investment, right? $150 million loss that they claimed due to outages and connectivity for their critical infrastructure. And yet, that occurred even though the CEO mentioned that they had just refreshed a lot of their technology systems, their technology infrastructure, I should say, and the backup systems to avoid that outcome. And then finally, sort of a GDPR data governance example is, of course, French regulators hitting Google up with a fine for Google themselves, right, for violating some of France's specific regulations. So all those are driving customers to say, how do I get better control of my data, better awareness of where that data lives, and more importantly, how can I more easily test, right, my ability to recover and meet some of the business requirements that I have. So what are those business requirements that we, or at least certainly we here at Druva, often hear and encounter with our customers? The first is the cloud mandate, and so that's moving both applications and the infrastructure itself, right, that the IT team manages and deploys. How can more of that be moved to the cloud so that you're focusing less on building or sourcing, I should say, deploying and managing that on-prem infrastructure, and more about how to make the pieces of an infrastructure and the service experience that customers, your sort of internal customers have, better, right? That's that infrastructure as a service play. The disaster recovery component, of course, mentioned several times, but customers increasingly want that capability, not just in the data center, and you see that certainly being driven through efforts like data center consolidation. So a lot of companies increasingly are saying it's simply just too expensive or difficult to continue to run sort of multiple separate data centers, so they'll consolidate down those data centers and look for other alternatives for disaster recovery. And that's often a disaster recovery as a service type capability. The cyber resiliency one we already talked about on the previous slide, but that's increasingly a key part of what customers are looking at. And then finally, data analytics. And data analytics is really, I think, the next wave of where customers are looking to extract greater value from the backup data itself, from all of that secondary data. And that's where cloud-based data protection platforms can often provide quite a bit of value. So what are your goals for data protection? What are you thinking about for the next 12 to 16 months? And while you may be thinking about individual pain points you might have around given workloads or parts of your infrastructure, I would challenge or ask you to step back and ask at a higher level what things would allow your team or you as an individual right, to deliver a higher quality of service. And one could be on-demand capacity, right? That's that ability to pay for what you need when you need it, rather than potentially overbuying what you need. The next element might be just how can you build faster? So when you need new protection capabilities in an office for a team, what does it take for you to sort of meet and deploy that? How quickly is it? It might be quicker if you're able to sort of offer some type of self-service out to those teams, right? So increasingly reducing sort of the need to respond to a help desk ticket, and increasingly allowing your internal or external teams to get what they need on their own. And then finally, how easy is it for you to have both a sort of a local presence, but also what I call the central governance capabilities across your organization? How easy is it for you to do that today with the tools you're using? Because that's going to help you manage some of your governance challenges. So is the move to cloud real for data protection? When you look at the landscape of all the providers that are out there, one question would be, well, what about all the other applications, traditional business applications that have moved to the cloud? And what you see is it's pretty huge. In fact, most of the names that we often think of today as leaders across that stack, everyone from Salesforce to the Zendesk to the RingCentrals at the top of the slide here, down to the MongoDBs and of course the AWSs of the world. Those are often becoming sort of the standards, the places that we go first for sort of that new project for moving things forward. And increasingly, that is also the case for data protection, right? And there's a difference, right, between the SaaS-driven and the traditional legacy. And that's maybe what I've talked to you about today. So Druva, what are we? What do we protect? Well, we're a unified SaaS-based data protection platform that protects your endpoints, your data center workloads, and your cloud workloads. It's a common cloud-based platform built on AWS, and we're able to deliver the backup and recovery capabilities for all of those different workloads and use cases, if you will. Disaster recovery. The governance capabilities are often quite important, and so simplifying how you can check those compliance boxes, respond to e-discovery requests, and more importantly, change how you archive and retain that data. Because a lot of times, customers today are still putting data out on tape for that long-term retention. And really, we've gotten to the point now where storing data in the cloud really can beat out tape for, I would say, a large majority of the use cases that customers have. And I can talk a little bit more about some unique things that we've been doing there to really further deliver sort of the value and the cost parameters that customers want. And then on the bottom here, data intelligence, right? So the ability to sort of get analytics on the systems you're protecting, the efficacy of your sort of protection approach, and then also even understanding more about the data that you have. And that analytics capability also supports elements like forensics and other types of investigation processes you might be following for your data that you have there. And machine learning at cloud scale plays a big role and an important role in being able to sort of enable those capabilities, because you don't have to spin that capability up yourself. It can be delivered at scale and maintained through the platform itself. So this picture is really meant to help you visualize the value of a sort of SaaS-based data protection, as the slide says. But the waves and the squares you see at the bottom really represent the contrast between how you perhaps purchase capacity or additional compute, if you will, and storage with a cloud-based SaaS approach versus a traditional legacy on-premises approach. And obviously the value is, in a cloud-based approach, you can scale when you need it. You bring on capacity and performance. If you need to do a number of large-scale recoveries, all the additional server power is delivered to deliver the data you need in the time frame that you need. And that's not necessarily an additional cost. You simply turn it on when you need it, and it delivers the files or the data, I should say, you need. The no installation or maintenance is pretty huge, right? SaaS is not a build your own, but installation maintenance is of course just one part of it. There's the procurement effort as well. Anytime you're going out to buy new capacity or new servers, then you get it installed, and then of course you need to maintain and patch it. So being able to take out that part of the equation often, and you may not take out all of it for your data protection approach, but the ability to even take out a big chunk of that adds a lot of value to customers. A SaaS approach as well can optimize the path to the cloud, and by that we mean capabilities like global deduplication and incremental forevers provide a lot of value throughout the full life cycle. So from the beginning, when you first back up those data sets, wherever those workloads live, you'll get dedupe across those. you don't need to sort of centralize them in one data center and then send them off to the cloud. So you're not having to move them twice across your bandwidth, and you're not having to store them twice. You're moving them directly to the cloud. And then more importantly, the ability to sort of reduce or dedupe that data across all the storage tiers in the cloud. Because as many of you know, there's, just as there on-premise you have multiple types of storage, you have the same thing in the cloud. And then once you're leveraging this platform, it becomes a lot easier to add new services, like disaster recovery as a service, or to tap into other types of data analytics services. So the Druva data protection value prop, and this is a sort of simple architecture here to give you a sense for some of the workloads that we protect on the left. And as I mentioned earlier, that's everything from your basic sort of file and prints, your database, some of the most popular database systems, your virtual machines, and of course your NAS workloads. And we send that data directly to our cloud-based platform in AWS. And then from there, you of course can also, if you are running VMware's cloud on AWS, we're able to back that up as well into the same cloud. And then importantly, you can of course recover that data wherever you need to. You could recover that back on premises, or you can of course recover it in the cloud as needed. You'll see in the top right the dark or the purplish cloud there is representing our disaster recovery as a service capability, and that really runs within your AWS platform. And so you're able to both test, so turn on the systems as you need to test recovery as frequently or infrequently as you wish. And then, of course, when you actually need to execute it, you can do that as well, where you can recover and run those systems in the cloud. And really all without hardware or any type of software across the bottom, whatever that may be, from your backup servers to the storage you might be using, or the appliance, or any of the tape infrastructure and the rotation of tapes on and off site that occurs. There often are questions, right, to folks who are new to this is, well, what if I have a really large workload with a demanding RPO or even RTO? And we do offer something called Cloud Cache. You see depicted here, it's essentially just a VM you spin up on any of your systems that provides that caching capability, keeping up to 30 days worth of optimized backups on there. And that allows you really to get that true LAN speed based recovery from the cache. And of course, if you are bandwidth constrained, or perhaps don't want a certain amount of traffic going across your WAN or going across the internet at a certain time, you can of course put backups there, and then they'll schedule them to go off at a different time. A bit more detail on our architecture and really what's behind the scenes. Same sort of workload you see here on the left-hand side. I'll talk a bit, right, on the right-hand side is a simplified picture of our architecture within AWS. And as I mentioned, we're a native cloud application, leveraging EC2 instances, so being able to deliver the compute services you need. You'll see the other elements both leveraging RDS and DynamoDB, right? So we separate out that metadata and the data, and that's what often that is what allows us to scale individually for you as a customer, but then also for all of the customers, for the thousands of customers that we support. And then one of the things that makes us unique is how we manage the data. So it's deduped data, globally deduped across the storage tiers. So we put the data in S3 and actually manage that data across the different S3 tiers for you. And then you have the ability to move that data that you have marked as long-term retention data to an archival tier, which in this case is Amazon's S3 Glacier Deep Archive. And we'll move those dedupe blocks or that dedupe data set into GDA, sort of the acronym for it, for you, and you'll immediately see savings to you. And so with Druva, you really only pay for the dedupe data that is stored. So often the term is back-end dedupe data. And if you were to essentially select a portion of your data that probably is already flagged as long-term retention data, and were to move it to Glacier Deep Archive, you would immediately see approximately a 30% savings on your storage, for that amount of data, for the data that is moving there. Now, of course, we're moving dedupe data across there, so it's not always a one-to-one ratio, but customers do realize those savings right away. And then what you see depicted below is a representation of how the cloud-based DR works, spinning it up in your AWS environment. We'll create a DR proxy, essentially, move those snapshots over, and then you can then leverage those using EC2. So I'll just mention two different customer stories that I think are great. So one is a U.S.-based company, Egan, over in Minnesota, 1,000+ employees and a 12-person IT group. And really their challenge was, they had an on-prem backup solution. They were 100% virtualized company, and really just were spending too much time and effort. They had a 12-person IT team, and were spending more time on the data protection effort than they wanted. The switch to Druva, saved them, really almost a full headcount, if you will, in terms of the hours that were spent for maintaining those systems and the storage and the backup infrastructure itself. And the state they've moved to now is it's a direct to cloud backup, so nothing on-prem anymore. And more importantly, they're able to meet some of their governance requirements much more easily. And sort of what was their environment? Just a little bit more on their environment, since it's not on the slide. But they, as I mentioned, they were 100% virtualized, a lot of virtual desktop infrastructure, hundreds of VMs, and a bunch of Chromebooks and other types of things that they deployed. Another company, Andritz, here is a largely they're a global supplier of systems and services for things like hydropower stations, pulp and the paper industry, metalworking and steel, etc. So that's sort of what they did. And some of the challenges or things that drove them to choose Druva were, first, how can they better meet some of their regional data privacy and compliance requirements. Second, they had tape in place, and it was a difficult process and something they weren't able to do across all their offices. And third, and often of equal importance, is the restore reliability and consistency. So when they went out to do those tests, they often weren't able to do it. And so, as often happens with many customers, they had, ironically, they had rising hardware storage costs despite the decreasing cost of disks. And they just didn't have a sense of really good visibility across their entire infrastructure about what's happening. And this company, they're about 25,000 employees across roughly 200 offices. So they made the switch to Druva, eliminated all of that tape infrastructure, all of that on-prem piece, and more importantly, solved many of the challenges or problems that they were having. Got that better access to the data and improved disaster recovery as a service. All right, so as you're walking away, why Druva? Well, we've shown consistently that we're able to lower the total cost of ownership for companies by up to 50%. We've got a calculator online that can help you see if that number is really going to play out for you. But often where that comes into play is this notion of no stranded sort of capacity, right, on the hardware side. And that's that idea of you often have to buy more capacity than you need now, wait till you get to roughly 60% full, and then suddenly you have to start thinking about more capacity again. So that's often a piece, one of the bigger pieces of there. No maintenance on your software costs. So as most people know, that maintenance can be anywhere from 10% up to as high as 22%, and there's no sort of administration piece. You don't have a multi-year commitment, and there's not a lot of customization, right? Because you're using a SaaS-based platform, so it's easy to use, easy to get out there, and it's an efficient platform. So very fast deployment. As little as 15 minutes, you can be up and running. And then as new features are released, and frankly, we're doing small feature releases every 2 weeks, and of course bigger ones more on a monthly basis. They're available to you immediately. And then we have some of the highest security certifications out there. We're in GovCloud and meet a wide range of security requirements. So what are some next steps I would encourage you to consider? One would be to get a demo, right? I mean, we're easy to use. We'd love to get on the phone with you and show you a bit more what the product can do to meet some of your needs. Of course, we always encourage you to start a trial as well. And so we have different ways for you to sort of pursue that trial. And then finally, assess a TCO, right? We have an online calculator today you can use to get you started. And then, of course, we're always happy to come on site, potentially to talk to you in person or do that online. All right. I'll jump over to I've not had the question window open right now, but I'll pop it open in case I see some questions coming in.
Yeah, great presentation, Peter. Let's see, we do have a couple quick questions for you, and maybe some more technical questions there that I've put in the queue as well. So the first question they're asking about is Druva hardware or software? How is it deployed?
Yeah, Druva is completely cloud-based, so there's no hardware or software required.
Oh, very nice.
As I mentioned, we do offer a cloud cache, which would be deployed on any of the hardware of your choice, for where you have essentially a backup requirements or specific recovery requirements where you have that what we call sort of a higher recovery time objective. And so if your bandwidth doesn't allow you to pull it down from the cloud at the speed you're going to need, then the cloud cache can be a great way to do that. And it's just a VM. You just deploy it, and you can deploy it from within the main console.
Very nice. And I want to call the attention to the poll question on the screen for everyone out there. What additional information would you like about the Druva solution? Let's see, another question here. This is kind of a two-part question, and that is, what's the licensing model? Is it per terabyte or per host? And are there egress and ingress charges to be factored in?
Sure. Yep. So the licensing model, I mentioned during the presentation, but we always still get the question. So it's based on the dedupe storage used. So we have a sizing calculator. Of course, we sit down so you can understand, given our sort of dedupe capabilities and the workloads you have, let's say, okay, if you've got 50 terabytes of front-end data, Druva, what will that look like on the back end to me? So we help you size that. But the important thing is really all you pay is for that incremental dedupe storage that's used as your environment grows. And obviously, we build in a growth rate into that piece as well. So that's it. You don't pay for clients, or if you need to do a big recovery, you're not paying for that either. So there's no egress charges at all either. So for pulling data up or down, nor do those charges exist as you move data, or we automatically move that data across the storage tiers for you. Even if we're archiving that data into GDA, none of those fees exist. You really just see one number.
Very nice.
And that's all. That's all you have to pay. Yep.
Makes it eeasy. Okay. And then
let's see.
last.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I see a quick, easy one here. Druva does not. We do not support tape, so we're completely cloud-based. We recover to disk.
Okay. And then probably the last question we have time for here is, and I don't know if you can answer this because it depends. But how quickly can I restore my data with Druva?
Right. You can restore. Ultimately, it's based on a mixture of your connection speed to AWS and your internal network connection. So we have customers restoring at LAN speed, whatever sort of LAN infrastructure you've got in your environment. So we do have customers doing that, and we routinely are demonstrating to customers that we're able to restore faster than some of the on-prem appliances that they have.
Okay. Very nice. Very nice. Well, Peter, that's all the time we have in our verbal Q&A here, but really great presentation. Thank you so much for being on today.
Okay. Thank you for the time.
For more information on Druva, check out the handout that's available for download there in your audience console. That is the definitive guide to enterprise data backup and recovery architectures. A really nice document, very well done. Make sure you download that. And as Peter said, visit druva.com, and you can easily give Druva a try for yourself. And now it's time for our next prize announcements. We have our next Amazon $500 gift card going to Amy Kwan from Maryland. Congratulations, Amy Kwan from Maryland. And then I have 3 more AirPod Pros. They're going to Josh Reynolds of Iowa, Marcus Matthews of Texas, and Paul Zajac of New Jersey. Congratulations to all the winners. More prizes to give away. Now it's time for our next presentation. We have Manjul Sahay of Nutanix, who is the Director of Product Marketing, and Christophe Bertrand, Senior Analyst at ESG. Take it away, Christophe.
Well, so here's the rhetorical question, which is, do you really need DR? And the answer is, well, yes, you do. And really in DR, you have 2 words, disaster. That's not good, but recovery is really the best part. And at the end of the day, it's really about what you do, what you put in place, the topologies, the processes, the people, so that you can recover from any type of problem. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. So my name is Christophe Bertrand. I'm a senior analyst at ESG. I've been an analyst for a little over a year, and I was previously on the vendor side for many, many years in product and executive responsibilities focused on storage, backup and recovery, replication, disaster recovery, etc. So I've seen quite a bit of technology, and more importantly, talked to many customers along the way, and it's given me the ability to really get a lot of interesting experience and gain that experience, and then now apply it to research. So that's what we're going to do. Just want to give you a little bit of background on where the market's at and what's really happening around disaster recovery. So a few charts that will help us get there are about to appear. First of all, I think it's important to understand what we're dealing with. What we have as a consequence of a disaster or a downtime of an application or lost data, and these are kind of all the same. It's really the consequences that could affect a business and really change the perspective they have towards you. And this is all essentially created by a variety of sources and problems. I'm not going to go through all the things that could go wrong. The list is long, but what's more important is what does it really do when you're down? As you can see, the issues are very clearly reported here by IT professionals. That's the people we surveyed. They're business issues. They are not necessarily technology issues at first. They're really about customer confidence, about money, about how the direct loss of revenue can be so dire that it affects the whole business in the end, simply because something has failed in IT and you have not been able to quickly get back on your feet. And of course, the other thing that's very interesting to me is the shock that it creates, the shock wave that it creates within the organization itself, with loss of employee confidence. If you work for an organization and somehow their systems are not performing or are essentially down, and that creates, I think, this reverberation across the organization that, hey, maybe we're not reliable as an organization. It's very, very bad for morale. Of course, brand is affected. I'm sure you've all experienced as users the frustrations associated with not being able to complete a transaction because the system goes down, you're on a website, or you're at a retail store and something is wrong with the checkout systems. All of these are simple examples to just tell you, well, look, the research is here, the data is here. There are many exposures to losing data, many very negative consequences to the business and the organization at large. So as we think about this and sort of keep it in the back of our minds, we also asked, as part of the many surveys that we run, again, always targeting IT professionals, that's whom we work with and whom we survey, essentially how many times people had to invoke a disaster recovery process or use a secondary site in this case, and this was a question we asked about the previous year. They think about last year, how many times did you have to go to a secondary site? Typically, you use a secondary site when something really bad happens with a primary site, as you can imagine. And as you can see, the distribution is very interesting. It's going to happen to you, for sure, and it's probably going to happen to you more than once. And I think that's what this distribution shows you. By the way, we'll keep asking this question every 2 or 3 years to see how things evolve. Things are not going to get better. There are many reasons, again, why you may have to fail over to a secondary site, between ransomware attacks or just hardware issues or site issues, availability issues of the network potentially, and, of course, all of the issues associated with meteorological type of problems, hurricanes, etc. And sometimes it forces you to shut down your data center. Just to think about that, think about the frequency here that has been reported, and you realize that, well, not only it's going to happen to me, but we've just seen it has a pretty bad effect if I'm down, if I can't get back on my feet quickly. So, we've also looked at what's going on with cloud. It's clearly a very important topic. And cloud is actually seen as a very positive, having a very positive impact on the space of data protection. And I think, as you can see from this pretty clear picture here, is most of our respondents, 87% of them actually, do believe that cloud is part of the answer when it comes to having a successful data protection strategy. So something to bear in mind. Also, something that's interesting here is the fact that cloud-based VMs and applications are perceived to be more resilient. There are many reasons for that, I think. For me, I would suggest here that obviously when you think about the hosters and the service organizations that are providing those capabilities, the ability to host VMs or deliver a service based on VMs, obviously they've made investments in technology and infrastructure that allow them to be extremely resilient. And I think that sort of permeates and reflects very positively on their service and is creating this feedback and this perception. So I don't want to spend too much time on research on numbers because we actually have a great solution to talk about today. And what I'd like to do is turn it over to Manju for his part of the presentation.
Thank you, Christoph. I think that was a great introduction and hopefully helps audience kind of figure out how disaster recovery is a key aspect for their IT strategy. So now that we had kind of got an overview of why disaster recovery or a BCDR plan is important, I would like to showcase to you how Zyleap from Nutanix is a true cloud DR service and would essentially check various boxes and come up with a better BCDR strategy or a posture for your company. So the idea of Zyleap is pretty simple. You have Nutanix running on-prem in your own environment. It could be running VMware ESX on Nutanix. It could be running HP Nutanix. Either is fine. And the data is continuously replicated or protected to XyCloud, which are essentially data centers run and operated by Nutanix. So the data is continuously replicated. If something happens to your environment, could be a planned one, could be an unplanned one, you just bring up those applications and VMs on Xy, and then it's business as usual for your end users. So what we achieve by the Zyleap service is you eliminate the need for dedicated disaster recovery site. So I've had the opportunity to talk to maybe 100 plus customers over the last few months. And the one common one common trend I see among customers is, how do I consolidate my data centers? And in particular, if there's a disaster recovery data center, can I get out of running and managing that business? And Zyleap enables you to do that. It's a true subscription service, which is managed from Prism, the Nutanix management console. So one single console to manage your primary workload as well as disaster recovery. And then if you have heard of or you're familiar with Nutanix one-click simplicity, which we have brought into the private cloud environment, you will see the same one-click simplicity in disaster recovery, in doing failover and in doing testing. Now, when I do a demo a couple of minutes down the line, you can see for yourself how simple and easy it is to use Zyleap service. So when I talk to customers, the key message I want to share with is the key differentiation is Zyleap makes disaster recovery simple, easy. If you ask yourself or many of your other peers, the most common reason to not do DR or to have a DR but which is not useful is it's very difficult to test it, very difficult to operate or set it up. I think what we have achieved with Zyleap is get rid of all those problems and make it really easy for you to try it out and work with that. So this is built in, which means you don't require any separate software or virtual appliance. It's built into Nutanix AOS software. When you upgrade to Nutanix AOS, you get additional DR functionalities. It is simple and easy. Simple production policies, simple recovery plans to get it set up. And all of it can be done with a one-click test and failover from Prism, which is a Nutanix management console. So again, I'll show you a demo, but I think the key idea is Zyleap makes DR simple and easy, which implies that you have a much higher probability of getting your business back on its footing as soon as possible once a disaster has really happened. The other key advantage for Zyleap is it lowers the total cost of ownership. So I'm sure many of you have done business TCO analysis about what does it cost for me to set up a disaster recovery site. And if you compare setting up a second DR site with, let's say, Nutanix and third-party software and hypervisor, compared to that, or even compared to setting up disaster recovery, a second site with Nutanix and AHV, Zyleap will come out to be considerably lower cost. We have great sales team who would be very happy to work with you to show how these numbers work for your exact scenario. And the reason we can offer a lower total cost of ownership is by taking out some of those costs and offering the economies of scale of cloud, built-in free VPN, firewall, DDoS, these kind of features. So simple and easy to use, lower total cost of ownership. Those are the two reasons you may want to consider Zyleap Cloud DR service. Now, all of these benefits and differentiations essentially come down from the way we have architected Zyleap. I think that's the secret sauce behind it. And that secret sauce is Zyleap is nothing but Nutanix architecture, Nutanix software running on data centers which are operated and managed by Nutanix. So the same exact architecture, what you have in your environment, is what we run and operate. And by having the same architecture on both sides, we can really make it work simple and easy. At the same time, we have been doing disaster recovery for many years. We have thousands of customers who have used this. So the feature set is pretty mature and rich. So if you consider a typical disaster recovery life cycle as a customer, you would go through 3 stages: planning and onboarding, testing it frequently, hopefully once every quarter at least, and then finally failing over and fail back when you need to. So in each of those areas, the Xyleap service is pretty mature. So the storage replication technology is the same as what we have been using for many years. Thousands of customers use it in production, battle tested. You could bring your own VPN, and we support all the important players: Palo Alto, Cisco, Checkpoint, Fortinet, Juniper, or you can use Nutanix VPN, or you can use Direct Connect, which is great for low latency, high bandwidth connectivity. We offer or let you test your DRaaS system as frequently as you need it. You can do it once every quarter if that's what you need, or even faster than that. We also offer SLAs on both RPO and RTO. So this is again uniquely different because it's a cloud service. We offer you SLA and back it with financial guarantees. So if for any reason the RPUs and RTO are not met because of a Nutanix problem, we will back it up with financial penalties on Nutanix side. That's a real big difference. I encourage you, go and ask some of the other DR options you're looking at and ask those vendors, are you offering me an SLA on both RPO and RTO? And most likely the answer here is no, unlike Xyleap. As about failover and failback, one-click simplicity, very easy to do. And the other big thing is Xi implements a full software-defined networking. So you can preserve your VM's IP addresses when they fail over to Xi. Now this is really big for many customers. Having your VM's IP address come up as is means you do not have to muck around with IP addresses and re-IPing and hope that the application works when they really fail over. Now, I guess the most exciting feature for Xyleap is that it's a true cloud service. I mean, there's a real distinction between a software and a service, and some of that comes out in the way we run and manage it. So let me share 2 data points. In the last 90 days, for our Xyleap service, which we are running in US, we would have done about 370 software upgrades. And every day, about 900 VMs fail over in our canary accounts. So we have in these accounts, VMs replicating data to Xi. They are failed over, left it running for some time, and then shut it down, fail it back. And this keeps on happening in loop, one after another, again and again. And why we do this is, if there's any problem in the environment, we find it first and make sure that you never experience it. That's the beauty of running a cloud service. We can do a lot of these things on our own to make sure that the service SLAs are met, and when you really need a disaster recovery to happen or work for you, it does and does not get into problems because of some things which were not kind of checked upon. That's the real advantage in my view, or the real benefit of having a true cloud service. And this is what customers find very beneficial or useful. So very recently, now I've had the opportunity where a customer made some changes to their VPN connectivity on their on-prem environment, because of which their replication to Xyleap broke down. We found this in our alerts, and we reached back to the customer and said, hey, it looks like something has changed your environment. Do you want to look at it and see if you can fix it back? And the customer came back and said, thank you for the message. It's really gratifying to know that you are watching the environment as closely as you are. What's the best way then kind of show it to you? I mean, let's see a real live demo of the Xyleap service for ourselves. So let me switch to sharing my screen. So this is the Xyleap service, and this is the live service. So I'm going to log into the service. It's running in our US East Ashburn data center, as you can see in the URL. So I log into the service. It's the same Prism interface which you have seen and you're familiar with. And let me show to you Two things. One, how easy is it to these some of the key features of Zyleap service, and then show to you the one-click failover capability which I was talking about. So if you're setting up disaster recovery with Zyleap, it is nothing but a three-step process. Step one is set up your on-prem Prism Central to Zyleap network connectivity, VPN or Direct Connect. And I'm not going to show that because it depends on Palo Alto, Fortinet, whatever you're using. But once that step is done, the setting up the actual DR is literally two steps. Step one, create a protection policy where you essentially give it a name to the policy. So let's say my business critical app protection on the location where you want VMs to be protected. What's the RPO you want? So you want the snapshots to be taken every hour, every 3 hours. Choose that frequency. How many snapshots you want to have? So this is a look back period. How many hours or how many days can you go back in case you have to do a failover? If these are app consistent recovery points, you can do that as well. And then you simply select the VMs you want to protect. So Nutanix offers this great option of using categories where you can essentially put VMs in categories and say all the VMs in this category need to be protected. The advantage of that is tomorrow if you add a new VM, it will simply be protected as soon as it's added to the right category. So this is it. This is one single screen with a couple of options. And as soon as I've done that, my replication of these VMs to Zyleap will start. The final step of setting up the Zyleap DR is creating a recovery plan. So this is how you can bring back your whole environment, let's say when you do a failover. Again, give it a name. Let's say my Biz App Recovery Plan. I think that's the real benefit. Customer environments, databases are the ones which would usually be brought up first. So let's say I want to bring up on my, database VMs first. After that, I want to have a delay of 5 minutes for the database VMs to be up and running and be properly configured. And then I want to bring up, let's say, all the favorite VMs of my employee payroll category. As easy as that. And when you do a recovery failover, it will exactly execute in the same sequence. You can also insert scripts soon enough, which will allow you to even do some custom configuration if that's required. And final step is, what's the network configuration? Like I mentioned, Xi has full software-defined networking, allowing you to do testing in a network bubble, and you could decide what's the network you want these to be done. The subnet range and IP range, all of that, you can do it. If any of your VMs require a public IP so that they're accessible over the internet, you could do that as well. So all this configuration you can write to from this one single screen. And in fact, if you don't provide, for example, a screen for test failover, that will be automatically created on the Xi side when you initiate a failover. So this is as simple as that. 2 screens here and a single screen for production policy, and your Zyleap disaster recovery set up and running. As simple as that. And you do all of this from within Nutanix Prism, the same exact console which you use for managing your production VM workloads. No need to go to a separate third-party console, third-party software, third-party cloud provider console, none of that. All right from Prism, one single management console for your primary and DR. Now let's say everything is going great, your DR is set up, running, and maybe you have a system, maintenance event, or maybe you have let's say a real disaster and you want to fail over. What do? Log into Xi, just like the way I did, come to this same screen, select the recovery plan which we created, and this is your one-click failover and test menu. Simply select the recovery plan, click on the test, click on the failover, and your failover will start. So in this case, it shows me primary location on-prem, the target location Xi, and I can do an unplanned or a planned failover. Planned failover is the most common, which is where is the 95% scenario. Unplanned is, for example, let's say you didn't know and for some reason your on-prem environment is not available. In that case, you can recover from the latest point or some other point in the past. And after that, you simply click failover. Once you do that, the failover will start. You click on the failover. You will see a history of all failovers, including the current one which have been executed. And click on any of the failover and it will give you all the details. Creating subnet, migrating VMs, powering on the VMs, one by one, all of the details are available. So any point of time, you can go back and see how the whole thing really worked out. So this is really as simple as that. This is that one-click menu, one-click test failover, one-click failover I was talking about. As simple as select the recovery plan and execute the failover. And this is the beauty of Xylee for the simplicity and ease of use. Great. I think with this, I am done with this part of the presentation. Hopefully, you had the opportunity to look at the simplicity and ease of use of Xylee service.
All right, great presentation there by Nutanix. Thank you very much. A lot of good insight, like the live demo. So let's see, I've just brought up a poll question that says, what additional information would you like about the Nutanix solution? I'll just leave that on the screen while I announce our next set of prize winners. So we have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Andrea DeVost from Illinois. Congratulations, Andrea DeVost from Illinois. And then we have 3 sets of AirPod Pros. These are going to Eric Gliblock from Ohio, Nick Zanotto from California, and the last winner on this set is Rajat Casturia from Pennsylvania. I'll post the prize winners' names there in the audience chat because I know I sometimes mispronounce the names. So we've got more prize winners to come, so stay tuned for that. And with that, I'm excited to introduce our next presenter on today's Data Protection and Disaster Recovery Megacast. That is Mr. Sean Darrington, Senior Director of Product Management at StorageCraft. Sean, are you there?
I am. Hi, everybody.
Thanks for being on, Sean. Take it away.
All right. Well, great. Well, thanks everybody for taking the time to dial in to the Megacast. Always excited to work with ActionTech Media on this. And what I want to do today was, number one, introduce myself. As you see on the slide here, I'm Senior Director of Product Management at StorageCraft. But really wanted to focus a little bit about, quickly setting the stage, but taking a slightly different angle on protecting data, but perhaps more importantly, recovering data in different scenarios. And as you've heard throughout the day, and I'm sure many of you read on a daily basis, that cybercrime and ransomware is no longer, more of an individual effort for notoriety, but rather it's actually a significant business to the tune of billions of dollars a year. And as IT professionals, we have to expect that it's not a question of if we will be hit, but rather a matter of when. And even if you look at some of the statistics over the last couple of years, phishing attacks and specific URL monitoring and modification, in addition to ransomware, has significantly increased in the percentage of attacks, as well as the attacks themselves have become more sophisticated, more targeted, and more focused on some verticals, particularly healthcare, where even in Southern California, and Texas as well, there are a number of regional hospitals that were targeted for ransomware because of, obviously, hospitals have to have the medical records, and there's an insurance exposure for records that are compromised, and so the chance of having a payout of that ransom for some verticals is higher than others. But fortunately, there are things that companies can do in addition to the perimeter security, firewall, making sure the AV on the desktops is up to speed and up to date, as well as internal best practices and policies for not falling for phishing attacks and so forth. But having said that, as that next level of when we as IT professionals do have an infection, what do you do to recover? And so that's what we've been spending a lot of time here at StorageCraft improving upon and remedying beyond what we've done historically for data protection, to actually combine the capabilities with OneSafe that is a converged scale-out storage solution. It actually has the scale-out storage solution for NFS and SMB file serving, and I'll get into the details of that in a minute, but it's also an inclusive way to protect applications running in physical servers or virtual environments and have the same cluster be used for multiple purposes, and actually rethinking the way that you can actually protect unstructured data. And for those organizations that are mid-sized enterprise that have, the 10 to 20 to petabyte 10 to 20 terabyte problem all the way up to the petabyte storage problem, OneSafe is a great solution for that. However, we've also focused on other environments, particularly smaller environments, which may have fewer than handful of servers, or for managed service providers that are providing data protection services for their customers, is a software-only deployment solution for the data protection capabilities, and that's ShadowSafe. And that enables the same SLA-based data protection policies to protect physical and virtual servers, but now this is a software-only model that can be used with just internal storage as a backup target. You can use other third-party storage as a backup target, but you have that option depending upon the deployment needs of having a full converged OneSafe deployment for storage and or data protection. You have the option for a software-only ShadowSafe deployment, and in each of these cases, particularly as we look at disaster recovery and disaster recovery as a service, with both of these, you have the option to replicate to StorageCraft's cloud services. You also have the opportunity to replicate your backups to Amazon S3, but that would be more of just a storage target. For the full DR as a service, regardless of the deployment of the converged scale-out storage or the software only, on a per job and per policy basis, you can replicate those backups to our cloud, and then in a matter of minutes actually recover those applications, have all the network, have all the storage, have all the application services running in StorageCraft's cloud, and then have that networking connectivity back down to your users on premises. And in StorageCraft, we have data centers in North America, EMEA, Australia as well. So depending upon where you're dialing in from, there's a very good chance that we'll actually be able to have the local DR as a service option for you. If you're in Canada, as an example, we also have Canadian data centers to facilitate that for the data locality and the data privacy issues that some of those countries have. So I wanted to kind of set the stage with, this is looking at the product offerings, but one of the things that we've done at StorageCraft here is actually taken a next generation approach to it. And I wanted to differentiate a little bit about what we're doing that is unique, because OneSafe is not a legacy storage architecture. It is not a traditional scale-up solution that you decide if you have a small, medium, or large version of the problem. If it's a 50 terabyte problem or 300 terabyte or 800 terabyte problem, you have to go into the small, medium, or large version of a traditional block store where you're dealing with LUNs, you're dealing with volumes, and you're presenting file system access to that, right? And it could be, I don't want to say just file system access, because it could also be block access with Fiber Channel or iSCSI. But the notion of a traditional block store where you're dealing with RAID, LUNs, and volumes, you're dealing with ones and zeros and parity, that's the traditional way that a lot of storage vendors have offered storage solutions. But the thing that is different about OneSafe is that we've actually designed and engineered our own object store that sits, if you will, underneath the covers and provides file system access. This is something that we have a number of patents around, that we've written our own content addressable object store. And this is particularly important because if you look on the left-hand side, we still present NFS and SMB file services to your applications and users. So whether you're dealing with VMware and NFS data stores, or whether you're dealing with home directories for file serving, archiving, engineering CAD CAM files, video repository, we look like network-attached storage. Just drop into your network, you have all the accessibility of NFS or SMB, but now you get the benefits of an object store. You get the benefits of inline deduplication, compression, continuous and infinite snapshots that are immutable, as well as the opportunity to encrypt that data at rest. Now, this is particularly important because once those files are written to the cluster and we do global deduplication across all the network shares, SMB and NFS network shares, we globally deduplicate that. Ultimately, what we're storing in the object store is an object. It is a hash value. And that is one of the advantages, particularly when you look at disaster recovery from, and ultimately ransomware recovery as a possibility for that, is that all that information, all those objects are immutable. So that information is able to be stored and protected in a way that allows you to recover it based upon the recovery scenario that you're looking for. The other thing to look at here on the right-hand side of the diagram on the slide is that object store, you can now think of this just literally as a pool of storage. There's no LUNs or volumes that you have to worry about, and is it sized correctly? Is there a file size limitation? Is there a file system capacity limitation? You're not carving up 1 and 2 terabyte LUNs to serve up to applications. Every share has equal access to that pool of storage, and as it grows over time non-disruptively, as you scale out, that pool of storage just increases, and the file system access, whether it be NFS or SMB, or if you look on the right-hand side there, the data protection, the converged data protection just sees more storage. So if you go from a 50 VM environment today to a 100 VM environment, or if the capacity per VM increases, the way that you have access to protect that through data protection remains the same. It just sees more storage. And that's a significant advantage to managing storage and buying storage that you need today and scaling out and incrementally growing over time, but on a per node basis, or in some cases you can even do per drive, where you just add a drive non-disruptively and you have more capacity, as opposed to trying to determine how much storage you need over 3 years and then buying that version and growing into it over time. With our approach with OneSafe, you're able to right-size that storage capacity planning, and if you have some applications that grew twice as fast as you thought, you can just add more storage, or if they grow slower than you expected, which unfortunately is not very common, then you can not purchase storage for another 6 months if you need to. So taking that just kind of as a level set in terms of OneSafe and the architecture of our object store that sits underneath the covers and gives you all the benefits of being able to scale out and add a node to a cluster non-disruptively, to be able to have a drive fail and not even replace the drive and bring it back to health. Those are all benefits of an object store, but you have the accessibility and the usability of what looks like network-attached storage and data protection. So from a protection standpoint for DR and even just local protection, there are a couple different ways that they're really looking at this. And number one is for all the unstructured data, you can store that in a OneSafe cluster. You don't have to have Windows VMs anymore doing file serving and having dozens of Windows file servers that have capacity limitations, that don't have continuous snapshots, that their VSS can actually be disabled by ransomware. With OneSafe, you can actually have all that storage stored in the cluster. The users are accessing the cluster directly, inheriting all the AD permissions that everybody's used to. But now you've got 90-second recovery points for all of your files. And we have 90-second recovery points for the first hour, and hourly for the first day, and weekly for the first year. And then after that, it goes to monthly. But that's where you can actually think about data protection differently, because now you're not actually backing up all the VMs that are running Windows Server. You actually free up the virtual server resources for other applications, other SQL, Oracle, etc. You're also freeing up the more expensive primary VMware storage and actually having that on OneSafe and having that be protected with the immutable snapshots. With the converged solution, you can still back up all those Oracle VMs and SQL Server VMs in an agentless or an agent-based model and back those up to the OneSafe cluster, as well as you can recover physical or virtual servers with OneSafe and the converged capabilities that we have. And so as you look at different deployment types, it's one of the things that a lot of IT professionals take a look at and, okay, let's do things a little bit differently. How can we decrease our backup window or ideally eliminate the backup window, right? And that's where you can use the OneSafe cluster, and depending upon your needs, we do have an all-flash array. So you can have an all-flash cluster for higher performing, say, video editing or higher performing engineering file serving. You can also look to the 4412 and 4417 models, which are hard drive based. These give you greater capacity. It actually prices less than Amazon S3, if you look at it that way, where now if you're storing all the unstructured data directly on the OneSafe cluster, you are now eliminating the backup requirements, the traditional backup requirements of the unstructured data, because you're relying on the snapshots. OneSafe can also be the target for virtual environments with the all-flash, as I was mentioning, or even just physical servers as well, right? But in this case, this is kind of the first primary storage. You can also use this as a converged secondary storage, right? So now it's actually backing up your physical servers. It's actually backing up all of your VMs in an agentless fashion to a OneSafe cluster. In this slide, I actually have two separate clusters, one for the primary storage for the unstructured data that all of your users are using and accessing, but that could also be the same target as your backup environment. Now, clearly you need to have a strategy between what's being backed up to what cluster, but if you do actually back up the same data to the same cluster, you can replicate that to another OneSafe cluster off-site if you have multiple data centers. If you want to go to our cloud for full DR as a service, you can set your data protection policy to do that. Or as I mentioned before, you could also go to AWS or Azure as a storage target. So there are lots of deployment options and alternatives that you have. If you start with OneSafe in one of these scenarios, if we're just, say, the unstructured data, just through licensing and software enablement, you can take advantage of the other capabilities, right? So the same hardware, the same clustering hardware can be used for multiple deployment types, and it's all managed seamlessly with one system. One system is our cloud-based management service. This enables you as an IT professional to actually log into one system. It's a web-based console, if you will. When I say web-based, like we host it in onesystem.exabox.com or onesystem.storagegraph.com, and you can manage your OneSafe anywhere in the world that they are. They all communicate seamlessly to that, just over HTTPS, very easy on the network and firewall settings. And a lot of the things that we've done over time is actually made most of the things zero configuration. So the initial setup of OneSafe in a cluster can be done in 20 minutes or less. If you've done a few of these, you can do it in less than 20 minutes. If you're going to add storage to an existing cluster, if you're going to add drives, if you're going to replace a drive that has failed, all those things are either one mouse click or zero configuration. And as you scale it over time, you don't reconfigure the applications because of the virtual IP address for the cluster, and the name of the cluster doesn't change. It just simply has more storage behind it. So that's really from a management perspective. Is one of the things that a lot of our customers enjoy is that they don't have to spend time managing the storage. It self-manages itself, as well as the things that you do need to do are very straightforward. For example, if you set up a OneSafe cluster and you're looking to remotely replicate that offsite to another one, and if you have 40 shares, let's say, that you set up for different engineering and HR and different purposes, you can actually replicate all 40 of those shares in 3 mouse clicks to another OneSafe cluster. You don't have to go in and have the clusters be identically configured on the primary and the secondary location, and how large is each share, and making sure those LUNs and volumes match up to each other. You can replicate from an all-flash cluster to a hard drive-based cluster. You can also replicate from a 50 terabyte cluster to a 500 terabyte cluster. It doesn't matter anymore what the storage is. You're just thinking about a pool of storage. Do I have enough capacity on my primary and my secondary location for that? And if you do, great. If you don't, you can simply add more storage at any point that you need to. And so as you look at this is really from a storage perspective. I was talking about the 3 mouse clicks for remote replication. The same is true for setting up data protection policies. So if you're going to protect those VMs and the physical servers, you can actually create a policy, and multiple policies if you'd like to, but a policy that's very straightforward where you just define the policy name and you can apply it to 1 VM or 500 VMs at the same time, and you're just determining how long you want to keep the snapshots. Right? So this is taking a snapshot of the VM, as little as 15 minutes. The drop down will give you hourly or daily if you'd like to. And there's just a question about recovery points. How many dailies? How many hourlies, weeklies? And then do I want to replicate this? In this case, if you see the diagram here, I'm actually replicating, backing up to OneSafe converged, but I'm also replicating that to StorageCraft's cloud. And another OneSafe cluster, right? So you can replicate to multiple locations if you want to replicate that same job. And so as you see at a very high level, you can create a data protection policy that is easy to manage, as well as you can assign that to some or all or any selection of VMs and physical servers that you'd like to. And obviously on the physical server side, you install an agent there. On the virtual server side, you have the option of agentless or agent-based, depending on what you'd like to do. You have those options as well. So that's kind of the data protection side of things. We talked a little about the snapshots for the unstructured data every 90 seconds and the fact that they're immutable and continuous. And then for the data protection for your VMs and physical servers, it's a very easy and straightforward way to set that up. But what about recovery, right? And that's really the most important part for the data protection and disaster recovery management process, right, is to be able to get the data back as quickly as possible and make sure that that actually lines up with the recovery time objectives that you have, as well as the recovery points that your business requires. And again, different applications are going to have different criticality, and certainly tiering that process and being able to see which one you're going to recover first, comes up a lot. So one of the things that we've done, this is another area where StorageCraft has a number of patents around, and that is virtual boot. This is the capability, again, through one system and a few mouse clicks, you can recover any sized VM and begin that recovery process in less than a second. And this is where we have patents around, as you see there in the diagram, the VIO filter. And the way that this works is that the recovered VM, I should say the VM that you want to recover through one system, you can see kind of the pull down here. You select the recovery point at which point in time you want the VM to be as of. And when you do that recovery, the VM begins to boot off of the OneSafe cluster. Now, if you look on that right-hand side, that OneSafe cluster is where the backups have been going. So when that VM begins to boot up in less than a second, it's reading the data off of the OneSafe cluster, and it's actually delivering it to the application, to the VM that's booting, and at the same time, it's restoring it back to the primary storage, that primary VMDK file. Okay? Now, in the process, after that Windows VM or Linux VM boots up and the application starts to be used, we're going to recover the data as the application needs it and deliver it directly to the VM while at the same time restoring it back to the primary storage. So now you're up and using the VM that you recovered well before you've actually recovered all the data. So you can think of it like we're doing and just restoring the data as needed by the application requests directly. And in the background, we're also restoring the rest of the data the application needs ultimately, but not immediately. It needs ultimately to the primary storage. And so at the end of that process, you have a VM that began to boot in less than a second, thought it was accessing the primary storage from the VMDK, but in reality, we were redirecting all those IOs to OneSafe while at the same time delivering it to the application and restoring it to the primary storage. So what that means is you're not standing up a VM to then recover a VM. You don't have to worry about a storage vMotion after that recovery process because all the data is already on the primary storage. It's just done. And that actually works for on-premises recovery, but also from a DR as a service perspective, if you are recovering in our cloud and you're running the VM there, you can run it there for up to 30 days, just normal standard pricing, but up to 30 days, and your applications are running in our cloud. All of your users are on premises, obviously. And when you're ready, you can use virtual boot to do that fail back on premises. Right? So it's very flexible and advantageous to look at how quickly you can recover a VM or a physical server as a VM as you need to. But particularly from a DR as a service perspective, failing back is one of the things that you can plan for. And when you have virtual boot, you're actually able to simplify that process. Okay? So we talked about for the physical or virtual server, this is how you can do a recovery in that fashion. But what about the unstructured data? Right? This is what I was mentioning as far as our continuous snapshots. We take those snapshots every 90 seconds to the first hour. So on a per share basis, and that cluster might be, let's say, a couple hundred terabytes, you might have 10 different shares. You might have an engineering share, you might have HR share, you might have a video repository. If you're in the medical vertical, you might have your just the X-ray images and 3D mammography files, those types of things. You can set it on a per share basis how long you'd like to keep those snapshots. The snapshots are deduplicated against all the primary storage, and the snapshots are immutable. So going back to that original architecture, what we actually store underneath the covers is an object. It's not a set of ones and zeros that are read, modify, write, like a typical block store. If you're going to write new data, the original objects are preserved, and new objects are created. If ransomware infects that file system, we're going to write out the encrypted files from ransomware. However, all the original files are still protected and untouched by ransomware because they're immutable. Right? New objects were created based upon the new file the new ransomware encrypted file. So that gives you the opportunity to set a retention period for what data is being protected, how long it's being kept, and if there's very little change, there's going to be very little overhead for your snapshot data, right? Now, if you have snapshots set to a year and you delete a bunch of data, you're going to have all that data kept around for a year. So when I was mentioning the snapshots are deduplicated against the primary storage, that's true, but if you have a lot of change in your data in terms of being deleted permanently as opposed to just updated, then you're going to have to obviously account for that, and you can see that in your storage capacity, your growth trends that we report on through OneSystem. But the reason that this is so important is that now, for the largest amount of your storage that's in your environment, most customers have more unstructured data than structured data. Most customers have less predictability about how quickly unstructured data is going to be growing. Most customers also have the ability to give their end users direct access to restore files on a daily basis. So if somebody's just making a slight modification and an error to the PowerPoint they're working on, they can just right mouse Windows previous version and get the version that was 90 seconds ago. Right? Now, if it's a full mapped network share infection from ransomware, then that can require, obviously, IT admin to go in and do that. But because this is all immutable, because it's all snapshot, you can actually clone those snapshots and you can recover those instantly. And again, this is something that's going to be available early next year. But any size share, you can recover from a cloned snapshot in less than a second. Any size share. Hundreds of terabytes you can recover in less than a second for all the unstructured data that's protected. And then obviously if you're replicating that to another OneSafe cluster, you can do that. And again, on a per share basis, you're defining not only what the snapshot retention is, but do you want to replicate that to your offsite cluster for disaster recovery? Right? Because I may be in a scenario where I have 20 shares on my primary cluster, but only 10 are higher priority and high enough priority that I want to replicate those 10 to another OneSafe cluster. So I've got 20 on my original source. I'm only replicating 10. That's fine. You can do that. If you want to replicate 11 or 12, you can do that. It's all on a per share basis. And the snapshots carry over to the replicated target as well. So you've got that option for recovery of an entire file, folder, or a complete network share. Okay? So it's very flexible in terms of how that can be used. There are a couple of questions that have come in here. So before I get to the last slide, let me answer some of those questions here. One of the questions was, how large can the clusters be? So the clusters, it depends upon the model. So I mentioned earlier that we have hard drive based as well as all flash. So the all flash model, you can have, well, in all the models, you can have 7 nodes in a cluster today. So for example, with the all flash model, you can have an all-flash cluster of 260 terabytes or so. From there, we also have the 4417 model, and then that cluster configuration, you can actually have about 1.4 petabytes of storage. So that number is going to continue to increase as we support larger number of nodes in a cluster, but that's one of the things that you can do easily. And the other question here is, NFS and SMB, are there any other protocols? So right now it is NFS and SMB access, NFS v3. We will be adding additional protocols. Because of our architecture, we can have microservices or different services that are set up to deliver file, iSCSI, S3, etc., but it all takes advantage of the same object store underneath the cover. So it's very flexible in terms of how you can grow and how you can deliver those applications, the data that they need and the users that they need. So okay, last I see we got some questions here in terms of the follow-up. There's one other in the slide, the previous slide here. I don't know if I can go back to that. There is here we go. So this link is a ransomware recovery demo that I did through OneSystem. So actually this is just very few slides to set up, but then this is all using OneSystem and showing how you can do virtual boot as well as showing you the snapshots and recovery from our continuous snapshots. So if you want to see a short live demo, not live, but a short demo on how to recover, you can click on that link and then I'll take you to the YouTube page. Okay. So I guess we can go back to the polling page and I will turn it back to you.
Yeah, great presentation, Sean. I do want to point out to the audience, you don't have to try to write down this link that's on the screen right there. If you just mouse over on the slides window, that YouTube link, and click on that, that'll open up the demo that Sean was talking about in a new browser tab. So I'll go ahead and give you a second to do that. Sean, one other question I had for you here that came in, they're asking, how do people typically choose between OneSafe and ShadowSafe?
Yeah, so the question there is going to be needs. If you're looking for just data protection, if you're in a smaller environment, then you can go with ShadowSafe, which is a software-only deployment. Particularly for smaller customers, if you've got tens of VMs, it's a good route to go. If you want to look to OneSafe, that's going to be where the OneSafe hardware, the different models, all flash or hard drive based, actually works with and has the data protection software built into the cluster itself. So two different models depending on kind of the scale and size of the data protection requirement. If you have something that also requires scale out storage, then clearly it's going to be OneSafe only.
Okay. Well, it's great. It's great that you all have both options available, because I'm sure every company has different needs and use cases. So good answer to that question. All right. Well, it looks like that's all the time we have for questions, Sean, but I'll put a few questions here for you in the queue for you. A great presentation. Thank you for being on the event today.
Yeah, thanks. It was great to be here. Thanks, everybody.
For more information on StorageCraft, of course, check out their website and also check out the handout that's available for download there in your audience console entitled Never Pay the Ransom with StorageCraft. All right. The next prize winners on the event today. Gift cards going to Diane Harmon of Oklahoma, Jared Uhas from Pennsylvania is the next winner of the AirPods. Another AirPod winner, Calvin Wigfall of Minnesota. And last AirPod winner, before we go to our next presentation, Jason Myers of Hawaii. Congratulations to all the prize winners. So thank you. And with that, I'm excited to introduce the final presenter on today's Data Protection Megacast. That is Mr. Craig Cook, a Vice President of Solutions Architecture. Craig, thank you for being on the event today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, take it away. Bring it home.
All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to be here. There's been some great content and discussion so far. And without further ado, let's dive in. As mentioned, I'm the Vice President of Solutions Architecture and Engineering at Flexential. Flexential is a hybrid IT solutions company that operates 40 data centers in 21 markets across the United States, with subsea cable connectivity to Asia and the South Pacific, as well as Latin America. We also provide cloud and disaster recovery sites across North America and Europe. All of those data centers, cloud, and DR locations are underpinned by our highly redundant 100 gigabit Flex Anywhere network. That not only connects your data centers together for our customers, but it also connects them to all the major hyperscale clouds such as AWS, Azure, Google, and Oracle. We're all gathered online today to talk about how to achieve application and data resiliency for your business. You've heard a lot about a lot of technologies today that can help you do that. Flexential has technology solutions as well. In fact, we leverage both Veeam and Zerto. Those were two of the software products that you heard about earlier. They underpin the Flexential suite of recovery cloud solutions. But more importantly, I'm here to talk to you today about how to manage and meet expectations for your customers and stakeholders when it comes to the availability of your applications and data. Expectations are key, in my opinion. Bill Gates once said, expectations are a form of first-class truth. If people believe it, it's true. Said another way, expectations are in the eye of the beholder. Pretty much everyone's expectations have changed in the last decade. As businesses' dependence on IT has grown significantly, customer expectations have changed accordingly. With the rise of smartphones and the cloud, individuals have come to expect that applications are always available regardless of time or location. And today, despite the increasing risks and threats to the business, customers' expectations have increased, not decreased. Customers, be they consumers, patients, citizens, or other businesses, have an expectation that your business is available no matter what the disruption. They don't catch any slack for, an extreme weather event versus a DDoS attack on your website versus a power failure that's the fault of the local utility. They expect a mature enterprise to have the plans in place to deal with the unexpected. The same is true with your employees. Some of the biggest impacts of critical events are to employee safety, productivity, and morale. At Flexential, one of our most important areas of focus internally is the relationship between employee experience and business success. Much like the connection between customer experience and business growth, happy employees deliver a better customer experience. The typical enterprise has hundreds of third-party relationships, and a lot of that value that you create for your end customer is a result of these supply chain relationships. If they're down, you're down, and vice versa. Third-party risk management has been a top strategic concern for many organizations lately, and enterprises are becoming more savvy about third-party risk. They're carrying out extensive risk assessments and looking past the strict SLAs that might be offered, and they're demanding proof of readiness beyond just documentation and questionnaires. And last but not least, your investors. Whether it's stockholders, banks, or insurers, we're seeing financial constituents also demand proof of readiness. It can determine who gets loans and who doesn't, who gets more funding and who doesn't, and who gets insurance and who doesn't. All of the stakeholders expect your business to be ready, no matter the disruption. That's what we mean by resilience, the ability of an organization to deliver on its brand promise, no matter the disruption. Some of you may be used to talking about disaster recovery instead of IT resilience. IT resilience is the next logical step to solve for those expectations we just talked about. Instead of being reactive, it's proactively designing for a resilient solution up front, and retrofitting resilience in where starting fresh is just not feasible. DR is about adding a plan B to your production site. Resiliency is all about planning for it up front as an integrated solution. While DR focuses on unplanned downtime, resiliency includes both planned and unplanned downtime. It's about building for HA in your primary sites and having geographic diversity with quick, granular failback to multiple points in time with minimal room for human error to ensure that you can meet those expectations. Businesses have become completely dependent on technology to function. Everyone is talking about digital transformation. Really that just means improving their IT capabilities to promote things like agility and innovation. And when done right, it's fantastic. It's implementing the systems to win, serve, and retain customers. And that sounds great, right? But with that dependency comes risk. And complete dependency can have tremendous risk. Complex IT environments increase the risk of downtime. That increased complexity means more components and processes that can fail. That means more opportunities for our people to make mistakes, and it becomes increasingly difficult to identify and remediate the root cause of the failures. Is your business ready with manual workarounds to keep customers happy? What happens when you lack the alternative processes when technology is unavailable? And many of those that have them I've seen, just haven't kept them up to date, and they're not providing the value that they expected. These next couple of slides, I'll just share with you some findings from a research study conducted by Forrester in the Disaster Recovery Journal. What they found was that nearly 2/3 of applications are now deemed to be business critical or mission critical. When you consider that the average enterprise has hundreds to thousands of applications, 2/3 is a daunting amount of applications when you think about it. How do you ensure that you're protecting all of those from everything that can happen? The next question they asked people was, how easy is it going to be for you to ensure that you don't lose data if something happens? In other words, what's your recovery point? How far back do you have to go to restore your data? Do you need to go back to last evening, last 8 hours ago, or an hour ago, or do you have continuous data protection like some of the solutions you've seen earlier today? Really, these numbers are pretty decent. For most people, the majority of those would lose less than 2 hours of data for their mission critical apps. But it's a different story when you ask them how long it would take them to restore that data and their applications. And this makes sense. Companies have generally kept up with different point solutions that have been made available to them by their storage vendors to do things like take snapshots in order to recover their data. What I haven't seen is people operationalizing that properly to account for the different ways in which they would have to restore the data depending on the situation that they're dealing with and make those applications available to their users again. If they have operationalized it, they haven't been able to automate it, and so it takes a long time for them to get back up and running. Meanwhile, their brand reputation is suffering with their customers, employees, partners, and investors. Extreme weather events are becoming more and more frequent, right? That's not a surprise to anybody. Regardless of your thoughts around climate change, I think this makes sense. The heat wave and the drought that Europe experienced this past summer is now twice as likely as before. It's happening once every 5 years instead of 10. In the U.S., 2017 was the most expensive weather disaster year on record. Harvey, Irma, and Maria were 3 of the top 5 costliest hurricanes ever recorded. But weather events are not the primary causes of IT disruptions and disaster declarations. And unlike this image, it's not always about humans being humans. These are the reasons that they found are the primary ones, right? Those first 2 are the most common, and really what that is the failures in equipment and the software that runs your systems. No surprise to anybody, but that's what IT resilience can really help solve for. Once you have that in place, it becomes much simpler to deal with other major causes because you've built an incredibly solid and resilient foundation for your applications and data. The other one I would point out here is those cyber attacks. We just saw a fair bit around ransomware and what that's doing, but I'm sure many of you have heard about the crippling attacks that have happened. City of Baltimore is a high-profile incident that happened this last year, and they were shut down for more than 2 weeks in an attack that eventually cost them more than $18 million. Sent the city into chaos as the hackers encrypted all their files and paralyzed their systems while demanding the ransom. Flexential's Recovery Cloud solution plays a critical role in helping customers deal with those types of attacks. In addition to reacting to them, our security solutions can help prevent them from happening as well. When I talk to customers and prospects, here's what I typically hear from them. Whether they have a BCDR plan in place or not, there's a significant mismatch in the expectations from the business and the capabilities of their systems. They always think that they're more capable than they are, they can recover faster, and they won't lose data. But they don't necessarily know that they haven't invested in the technologies and the architecture and the people and processes to make that happen. IT and the business unit leaders might be talking, but it's rarely the top item on the agenda until it's a major problem. And usually it's too late at that point. What we find is too often there's not enough testing, very little integration with IT governance. So when I talk about that, I mean things like integrating your DR systems into your production change management processes and making sure that your thought process accounts for those things so that when you make changes in production, they're going to be reflected in your secondary sites. When they don't do that, the result is generally an outdated infrastructure that causes significant pause when it comes time to declare a disaster and actually fail over to the secondary site. They don't have enough confidence that it'll work, and so they don't know what the procedures are to fail it back because they haven't tested that. And, a resilient infrastructure design is really what that's designed to address. It helps simplify this to reduce the process overhead and automate the propagation of changes to the secondary site. This makes isolated testing easier, gives you the confidence you need to ensure your applications and data are available for your users. That's why I recommend the Flexential DR Planning Services team to our customers. They help walk a customer through what they will need and draw up a plan to build out a resilient architecture and a method of procedures to meet their stakeholders' expectations. Once the environment is built, the focus must switch to testing. You should consider your first few DR tests as a learning experience. Expect them to fail and set expectations accordingly with your customers. We have seen customers fail over without conducting successful tests beforehand, and it can create a lot of challenges for an organization. Only once you've completed several successful tests should you choose to conduct a planned failover of your environment to be 100% confident in your resilience strategy. There are companies that fail back and forth regularly to ensure the resilience is ongoing and instill it in their teams. This might be overkill for some of you, but at a minimum, you should be conducting regular tests to see what's changed that you haven't accounted for. Some type of ongoing testing is key in my experience. When you're evaluating the capabilities of a provider, it's important to not just focus on the core product features. These are definitely important, but it's just table stakes. They're not differentiators. Consider what additional capabilities they can bring to help you with things such as non-virtualized systems. Typically, this is for things like mainframes, Unix, large database servers. How are you going to make those resilient? Zerto and Veeam are great technologies, but they can't always solve for those things. Having an ability to put those systems in colo right next to a disaster recovery cloud or production cloud that's got always on systems, those are all options that are available with Flexential, and we can leverage our professional services team to help come up with the right design for you. Having a provider in the trenches alongside you as you create a robust design and a plan is key. But also knowing that your chosen provider has a large, dedicated, and experienced team of support resources to help when disaster strikes is critical. Email and portal support doesn't really help you when you're in the the thick of it and everything is going wrong. You really want to be able to talk to somebody to help understand what's happening and what the next steps are and how to set expectations with your stakeholders during those events. Things to watch out for, look at the fee structure and make sure that it maps to your needs. If it appears too good to be true, it probably is. Often you'll see very, very low monthly costs with very, very high costs for testing and actual failover, any additional network usage, things like that. That's a normal thing that we see out in the industry, and it's something to watch out for because we've seen a lot of customers bit by that. Ask if you're working with the providers, ask them to walk you through what the typical scenarios are that you expect and what fees you will incur for things such as testing and failover. Flexential has 6 DR nodes across the U.S. to mitigate the risk of oversubscribing against a large regional event, but it's also to provide low latency DR solutions for our customers. In my opinion, this is how you meet your stakeholder expectations. Let's take a minute to walk through a real-world example of one of our customers, a leading provider of healthcare and pharmacy services across the United States. This customer was breaking away from a large, inflexible outsourcer and needed a new data center and an infrastructure to match. They chose Flexential to build them a new resilient IT environment that consisted of 2 sites spread across the country. After the design and planning phase was completed, we helped them execute a phased approach to migrate over 800 VMs to a private cloud with Flexential. To help facilitate application testing, we created a project plan that gave them the control they wanted over the timing of systems being moved and the number of phases that allowed them to work with their application testers to make sure that the schedule met their requirements. By leveraging Zerto and our professional services, they minimized the amount of downtime during the phased migration. They replicated the VMs, tested them, and then failed them over in the appropriate move groups at the appropriate time. This approach had the added benefit of an inherent failback plan. In the event that the failover didn't work, they just kept running in the current data center until they worked through the issues. From a toolset standpoint, Zerto for migration and then subsequently leveraging it for DR made it much easier. But true success came from the collaborative planning and execution between our teams to ensure a smooth handoff. After all, we were assuming management of all of the systems once they were cut over from the previous provider. This company's growth strategy is primarily based on acquiring other companies in their space, and this has now become a standard methodology for them to absorb the IT assets from those companies that they acquire. Before we take questions, I'd like to invite you to download our Beyond Disaster Recovery white paper by clicking on the Flexential link under the Handouts tab on your screen. If you can't find it, don't panic. We will send a link to download it following this session. Otherwise, you can get it from our website at flexential.com. All right, let's jump to the first question.
All right, yeah, great presentation, Craig. Let's see, we do have some questions for you from the audience. I'm just going to go to this poll question that says, what additional information would you like about the Flexential solution? We'll just leave that up while we do some Q&A. First question that came in here, they're asking, what's the most common mistake or misstep that you see companies out there making when they are evaluating or reevaluating their resilience strategy?
Yeah, so I think there's really 2 things that we see typically. If they're in the strategy phase and looking at what they need, they aren't talking to the business enough to really understand what the requirements are, and that can be a long, arduous process. There's two tracks I see people take. One is a very detailed understanding, what exactly they need, and some of this is dependent on the size of the environments. But the other side is the tool sets that things like our Recovery Cloud solution provide give you the ability to protect just about everything very cost effectively. And that's one of the nice things about it is you don't necessarily have to get into a super high level of detail. You might want to understand orders of priority. And then, obviously, depending on budgets, you've got to negotiate that with the business. But more and more, as you can see, I mean, if 2/3 of the applications are mission critical or business critical, the vast majority of the environment needs to be covered. So it's less about, it used to be tiering from 0 to 5 and, all these different recovery times leading up to weeks. The reality is now the expectations are that pretty much everything is going to come back up. Even if they're not mission critical, they're still a pain for your users, and their tolerance is relatively low for more than a couple days. So it's important to make sure that you've got the right scope set out and understand what the priorities are.
Okay, that's good advice. And then when you talk to companies and you help them with their strategy, what's the next step that you typically tell them to take?
For us, our recommendation is really to engage around what we just call at a basic level DR planning services, right? And so that's where, depending on where the customer is at in their journey, everybody's got a different level of experience and maturity around it. Some have never done it before at all and need to start with some criticality assessments around their applications and understand what parts of their business they need to make sure are up and running first. And others have already done a lot of that and just need some help with the architecture or the design. And we have different modules within that DR planning services that allow our customers to kind of step in wherever they need to, so we can meet them where they are.
Okay, nice. And you talked about preventative testing. Can you kind of define for us again what's preventative testing, and how do companies, really add that to their disaster recovery process?
Yeah, disaster recovery testing used to be a very, very arduous thing, right? It was typically in the days of tape, you had to have systems and like for like systems. You had to do a bunch of tape restores. It took a long time. You had to get your testers involved. It was very arduous. So, as you can expect, humans being humans didn't necessarily do it all that often. They tend to do the bare minimum. Preventative testing is, sort of twofold. I talked about it a little bit earlier, but one is being able to do isolated testing. So the solution that we provide gives you the ability to isolate your DR test network from your production networks and be able to test all of your applications. And so you can do that on an ongoing basis, with your application stakeholders, and being able to, schedule that, at your leisure, really, to be able to fail over the systems. Make sure it also helps you build a really good understanding of the dependencies between those systems, so that if something's not functioning or if a particular part of your environment needs to be recovered, then you can do that quite easily, knowing exactly which systems need to be bundled together and brought up together. The second part of that is, those customers that tend to actually fail over and fail back. That is the best example of proactive preventative testing. So they actually fail over to their secondary site and run there in production for some period of time, and then fail back to their primary site. And in some cases, they don't even call them, primary and secondary. They're just, which one happens to be live today. And so, that just is one of the ways that people have evolved this to really ensure that, they're able to deal with something, whether it be, something that happens within their data center, or, a more regionalized event, or potentially even, those ransomware type of attacks. It's just giving them peace of mind, and not only that, but the assurance that what they've done, the investments they've made, and the procedures they've developed are going to function for them.
Very nice, very nice. And to clarify just about Flexential, I know we're talking here about data protection and DR. I mean, does Flexential do more than that?
Yeah, absolutely. We offer, co-location services. We've got, like I said, 40 data centers across the U.S. and interconnected by a 100 gigabit redundant backbone that we own and operate. And then on top of that, we build out a different set of services. So we build out cloud services. We build out that includes both multi-tenant and single-tenant cloud services, and then also disaster recovery, security solutions, as well as data protection.
Awesome. Yeah, I was learning recently about everything you do at Flexential, and I was surprised to hear just the breadth of the offering. So, very good presentation. Thanks for bringing it home, wrapping it up today's Data Protection Megacast. Appreciate you being on, Craig.
Thanks very much. It was good to be here, and I hope everyone enjoyed themselves today and learned something.
Excellent. And I want to remind everyone out there, don't forget to download the Flexential Beyond Disaster Recovery Guide. It's right there in your audience console under the Handouts tab. You can just click on the PDF and download it now. And with that, it is time for our final prize giveaway on the event today. we have an Amazon $500 gift card going to CJ Utter from California. We have then 3 more AirPods, our final set of 3 AirPods going to Kathy Means of West Virginia, Jermaine Vince of Colorado, and Eric Hildrum of Minnesota. Congratulations to all the prize winners. I see CJ said in the chat that he won. Congratulations to CJ. Congratulations to our 20 AirPod winners and our 7 gift card winners on today's big megacast. We call it a megacast for a good reason. We have mega prizes. So thank you, everyone, for your support. Before you go, I want to remind you to subscribe to the 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes store. Follow us on Actual Tech, or follow us on LinkedIn. You can follow Actual Tech Media. That's where we're posting all of our latest and greatest content. If you are a potential sponsor of an upcoming event, email us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And finally, we hope that you will join us for our next event, which happens to be in 2020. That's right. Our next big megacast or EcoCast event happens in 2020. So make sure that you join us on that event. Of course, we have multiple weekly webinars that are happening, and you can subscribe or register to those at events.actualtechmedia.com. In fact, you'll be automatically redirected to that webpage at the end of the event. Thank you, everyone, for joining the event today. We hope you had a great time. We hope you learned a lot. Happy holidays. See you next time.